across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, hello and a good morning to you, if it is a good morning. I mean, if you'd listened to Rachel Reeves' speech spreading doom and gloom, you'd be mistaken for thinking there is light at the end of the tunnel, because it seemed to me, with all of the political spin, laying out the context for what looks like it's going to be a pretty punishing and bruising budget at the end of the month, the one message that was clear is we're all going to have to bear the brunt. And why? Apparently, according to Rachel Reeves, it's everybody else's fault, isn't it? It's about that 22 billion black hole that her predecessors left. But despite there being FOIs into the Treasury from the Financial Times even at last year's budget, they didn't come up with an answer of where the 22 billion came from. That has now swelled to 50 billion. And Rachel Reeves is blaming things like the interest payment on debt, the fact that the economy is slowed down, that the productivity projections aren't what we thought they were going to be. Of course, that is the result of Russia invading Ukraine. Still, that is the result, of course, of supply chains. Still, none of it is the profligate waste of doing things like massively increasing public sector pay when the country can't afford to do it, pumping billions into fantastical net zero projects, which is essentially just sending our taxpayers' money over to Beijing and also increasing energy bills in the process. No, nothing to see here, Gov. No, she's been the Chancellor for 1 year and it is still all the fault of her predecessor. I think we both know that that's probably porky pies. But there you go. I think we can all brace ourselves for a battering in the budget at the end of the month. We're going to be digging into that, as well as the other big stories of the day. Now, if you want to have your say on any of the topics we are discussing throughout the programme, we'd love to hear from you. 03444 99 1000 is the number to dial. It's your normal network rate. So what are you waiting for? It costs the same as ordering a pizza, phoning your nan, getting in touch with your plumber, and definitely not those sorts of phone lines that we don't recommend. You can also use that number to send us a WhatsApp message and leave us a voice note on WhatsApp. I didn't have any voice notes yesterday, and those regular listeners know how much I enjoy a voicio. So do please lay down in a short track your beliefs and opinions that we can play out on air. 87222 is the number if you'd like to send me a text message. If you're going to be old school about it and smuzz, you have to write the word talk before you write your message. We're on X at talkTV, and without further ado, shall we welcome aboard HMS Common Sense, our very first guest. It's Reform UK Mayor for Greater Lincolnshire, Dame Andrea Jenkins. Good morning, Andrea. Hello. Right, let us start off with still the story that is headlining the most today, which is the horrific stabbing attack on trains. And we've got statistics out today in various newspapers looking at assaults on trains, which have tripled in the last decade.
Yes.
They've risen from 3,000 in 2014 to 15 to 10,000 during the past year. It works out as 28 assaults per day, 11 of which are sex assaults. What is going on?
I think it's actually also been that we've become soft-touch Britain. I mean, I believe, and as we know, Reform does, no crime should be too small to go unpunished. But if you look over the last few years, I mean, you've seen like the West Yorkshire Mayor, for example, who's got the Police Crime Commission powers. All they're pushing out is hate crimes or non-incident hate crimes. And they're not focusing on the core issues, antisocial behaviour, sex attacks, and arresting people as they should do. So we've got to get back to the basics. We've got to stop importing criminals, Alex, and make sure there's a place, a consequence, whatever the crime. I think that is the issue. We've become soft-touch Britain, not only with migration, but with crime as well.
Is there something else going on here? Is there sort of a disintegration of societal harmony, of standards, of cultural mores as well? Because I agree with you, without a doubt, we are turning a blind eye to low-level crimes, to antisocial behaviour, barging through ticket barriers and the rest of it. But when I look at what happened on that Cambridgeshire train, one thing stuck in my mind, which is knives have always existed throughout history. So throughout history, people could have stabbed other people. We never needed to have things like knife arches. We never needed to have stop and search because people weren't getting on trains and stabbing other people. So there's got to be something else going horribly wrong in our society.
Completely. And I think it started in the Blair years with the Human Rights Acts. And look how in schools there became less discipline. And you've got to start in the home and in the school for the discipline and teaching young people right or wrong, haven't you? So I do believe there's been a decline for decades, unfortunately, and we have got to get back to basics. I mean, I think, unfortunately, under this Labour government, we'll have even more of nannying. We need to be also pushing back on parents to parents, because, I mean, look, even years ago when I used to teach in schools, Alex, and I still speak to teachers today, you have children coming to school who do not even know how to clean their teeth. They don't know how to hold a knife and fork. They're coming in, not even dressed properly. So you've got to teach the basics, and we've got to push back at parents for this. So I think some of it's bad parenting, some of it's the state, probably a lot of it is the state, where there's no place of consequence for any crime. We've got to start young and tackle this. And it's also the mass migration, as we've seen, illegal migration. We've been importing criminals, and we are soft touch Britain. So I think until we get reform into government, we're going to continue to see this downward spiral.
How alarmed are you that it appears that the would-be murderer, the attacker on the train to Cambridgeshire, there were 3 attempts to stab people, we believe, before this particular incident. And yet the police have not been able to apprehend this man who had appeared in a barber shop with a knife. We can see CCTV footage of that, who is believed to potentially have tried to stab a young boy in Peterborough Town Centre, and also is believed to have potentially tried to carry out an attack in the early hours of the same morning on London's DLR. And yet he was still, it would seem, at liberty. What is going on? Are the police just overwhelmed? Is it a cut in numbers? Are the priorities wrong? I mean, how on earth are we in a situation where a potential knife attacker for a period of 24 hours is at large with an offensive weapon?
I think there's several elements to this, Alex. Number one, we did see how Theresa May cut the police numbers, and we found a lot of local police stations were closed down, so they haven't got that community link. We need to return to community-style policing. But on top of that as well, I think that there's not as much face-to-face policing. I mean, I read earlier that it said quite horrifically, when one of the shops or hairdresser something had complained about the knife incident in the barber shop, they're said to upload a video. I mean, really, some things are serious. The police should have been straight down there, shouldn't they?
That's chilling. That's chilling. Imagine if a knife-wielding maniac turned up at your surgery or in your office and the police say, "Oh, can you send us a video, please?" Absolutely.
So there's got to be a full investigation. I mean, it looks like, doesn't it, that there was 3 opportunities to stop this evil maniac from hurting people, but it looks like those opportunities have been missed, which is a tragedy, actually. And lessons must be learned by this, but most importantly, we've got to stop this woke policing, get people on the street. But there's also, as I said, there's police numbers. I mean, in Lincolnshire, it's been consecutive governments. I think it was under the Conservatives, it was called Safe Seat Syndrome. They didn't invest in policing. And so when you've got an increase in population, and in Lincolnshire, in our seaside areas, we get an increase in population in the summer months, you don't get the extra policing. So they are struggling where that's concerned, but do away with these hate crime incidents and actually focus on real policing. That's what I'd suggest, really.
Yes, I wonder as well, and my prediction would be, we're not going to get into this now, my prediction would be over coming weeks and months, we might start having to have a discussion about things like psychosis, illegal drug use, especially those that are psychosis-inducing, whether we need to talk about dangerous and provocative content online as well, from drill music to
on that point, actually, on that point, I mean, and emails, I mean, it's been going this way even for quite a while. It's got worse under Labour, but even under the Conservative government, as I've said before on Talk, I've had 8 death threats over the years. At one point, I had over 80 emails from a constituent who lived 1.5 miles from where I lived, telling me I need to buy a stab vest, I need to watch it, and even having to go about my child. The police did not do anything. I had to go to the Speaker and the Home Secretary at the time. And look, the Joe Public can't do that, can they? To try and get them intervene. And the guy still got let off. He said he hates Tories, he said at the time when I was a Conservative, and he was bored. And so, again, no place of consequence.
No, I totally agree. I think we're going to have a national conversation about this, because there's clearly people with a lot of mental health issues who are all also looking at very provocative and dangerous content online. Let's move on now and talking about dangerous content. The BBC. I cannot believe this. I mean, I can. Part of me can believe that it would come to pass, that there are editors at the BBC who have, in their mind's eye, they feel like it's their public duty to pillory Donald Trump, to publicly crucify him. But let's look at the clip again, because doctoring actuality to this extent, and I was BBC trained, doctoring it to this extent, it just breaches every sort of moral and broadcasting code in the book. Let's watch.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
I mean, there is a big difference between someone giving opinion, like I often do, such as the BBC should probably have a long, hard look in the mirror and question whether it should even exist, and actually what this is, which is a deliberate falsification, a deliberate fabrication of actuality. What do you think should be the consequences of this?
I've been calling to defund the BBC. I was part of that original campaign years ago, Alex. It should not have taxpayer-funded money. If they want to be impartial, pay for it themselves. And you cannot have a state broadcaster, though, with such bias, but they've got away with it for too long. So really, the bar's low, they get away with it. But we've seen it I've seen it in even local media where they, and also national media, where they just clip certain bits and take things out of context, just to do headline grabbing and don't actually put the full context. This has gone on for too long. It's not actually, I don't think it's a fair type of publication, really, in broadcasting, do you? And no wonder that especially regarding the BBC, no wonder that the public, a lot are failing to pay the BBC licence. I don't actually blame them. And you'd like to see
it gone altogether, the licence?
Oh, of course I would, yeah, completely.
Well, I mean, from my point of view, I've got a slightly different opinion on the BBC, and we won't bother getting too much into that. I actually think that having a public broadcaster is a great asset as a nation. Lots of other countries want it, but there is something very wrong with the BBC that we need to change. I would say we have to absolutely cut into smithereens the licence fee, but hold the BBC far more accountable, and no taxation without representation. But looking at accountability, I think that, if Donald Trump decides to bring a suit against the BBC, given that this content on BBC World is probably also broadcast in America, there would be grounds for this to happen. And in the United Kingdom, there are caps on how much you can get from a defamation case. In America, no such thing when it comes to damages. But my problem with this is if he does go after the BBC, it will be the likes of anybody who owns a television set and wishes to use it to watch any programming live, that they will have to pay. I actually personally believe that the editors and the directors of this content should be held personally liable.
Yes.
They should be sacked, and when that defamation case comes, they should be the ones to have to scrimp and save and pay their way out of this.
Yeah, I completely agree, because it'd be the taxpayers footing the bill otherwise, wouldn't it? Which is wrong. They didn't call for this. Yeah, there's got to be some accountability, but you've also got to, the person at the top who's allowed this culture to carry on. I mean, I refuse to do Newsnight anymore after it was like 4 against 1. It was just like an aggressive pile-on. You've been on shows as well, haven't you, Alex, and seen that? I mean, look at the Question Time audience. They'll probably pick every lefty in the country, put them in that room. It's never balanced, is it?
Have you ever noticed, Andrea, because, as you said, I've been on various programmes before, whether it's Politics Live, Newsnight, Question Time, any questions. One thing I know, as soon as I turn up in the studio, I know exactly which seat is going to be mine on a panel, because they always sit me at the very far right. They always put me right on the edge, as if to say, oh, these are the nice normal people. That's the lunatic there in the corner. Little things like that.
Well, do you know what was funny, actually? Yeah. Any Questions was in Gainsborough, which is obviously in Lincolnshire, and I got a really good vote share in Gainsborough. But when I walked through the audience to sit down, and I was smiling, and I got glared at, and I thought, this must, I got a good vote there. I didn't even get one person smiling or being positive. So I do think things are hand-selected.
Oh, no, I mean, I think what the problem is, people have to state the way they voted in order to get into an audience, but the left-wing are very good at scheming and lying and coordinating. And I think people deliberately say, I voted Reform, knowing full well they didn't, in order that they can boo and jeer. Boo and jeer we should do at Ardil Khan, who is the vile child rapist who actually impregnated a 13-year-old girl. He's been subjected to a Home Office deportation order, barring him from ever returning to the UK. He left Britain after fighting deportation for nearly a decade. I wonder who is having to pick up the legal fees for him, claiming that removing him would breach his human rights by depriving his teenage son of a role model. You couldn't make it up. He's no longer at home, according to Greater Manchester Police, when they knocked on his door to conduct their normal post-prison release compliance checks last month. Glad to see that they're watertight. But the good news is that he's apparently not allowed back in. It's believed he's left for Europe. I mean, it's all about going, ha, you can't get back into the country. But on the other hand, he's got off scot-free, hasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, the fact for, like a decade, he wasn't deported because of his human rights. But what about the human rights of the poor children whose lives he and others have ruined? There's no justice. And I mean, look, where paedophiles are concerned, anybody who rapes a child, in my books, I'm a mother, I don't believe they deserve to live, but that's my personal view.
Let's finally, quite going to have to do a hand-baked turn and a bit of a dramatic manoeuvre away from your last sentence to the budget coming up at the end of this month. And Rachel Reeves laying out the context for what seems to me is going to be a gruelling set of demands on everyone in the population, apparently. We've all got to have broad shoulders and bear the pain. But the problem is, we know, don't we, Andrea, that there are people who simply aren't bearing the pain. There's a lot of people who are sitting there at home right now under slankets while I have a 5:30 in the morning alarm and pay my own way into work and then pay about 50% of what I earn at the highest rate of tax, despite demanding nothing of the state. In fact, there are people living at large in 4-star hotels at the pleasure of the British taxpayer. So when she says we've all got to bear the weight, she doesn't really mean it, does she?
No, completely not. And you know what angers me as well, actually, Alex, is how she always attacks Reform for not having a costed budget, yet she's breaking manifesto commitments, allegedly, with this budget. And yeah, you're right. How can we be putting people in hotels? How can we allow people to, as you said, languish at home and not get them out to work when people are struggling when they do the right thing? We've got to change the system where work does actually pay. I was very pleased with Nigel's speech yesterday, and I think that he was right. We are potentially heading into an early election because, let's face it, all the doom mongering and bad decisions of the Labour government and Reeves, it's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy with them, isn't it?
Well, I think they are
losing
going to be
market
forced
confidence.
To, right. They've not been able to get their sort of original cuts to welfare through Parliament. I think she's going to struggle, and that is where even the IMF have said she's got to make significant changes.
The public sector pay rises and the cost of putting people in hotels, etc. The money they spent, the billions they spent on net zero. Look how they are all across in Brazil at the moment, lauding it up on taxpayers' money.
Oh, I know.
Apparently to save the climate.
Now, before I let you go, Andrea, and I've got to do that fairly soonish, I would be remiss if I didn't challenge you over something. You're talking about Labour breaking manifesto commitments if they go on to increase income tax in the budget at the end of the month. Is the fact that Reform UK are putting up council tax when they committed themselves to conducting Doge across any councils that they took charge of, is that breaking a manifesto commitment? Because whether it's not explicitly doing so, it's certainly let down your voters.
Look, I mean, nobody wants to raise council tax. Of course they don't. I mean, I have not put in a mayoral precept on, like a lot of mayors are. I'm trying to make sure we spend money wisely. But as Richard Tice said earlier, Reform didn't promise to not raise council tax. They promised to actually make sure that the money works for the public, that they save money. I mean, look, what I'm finding in Lincolnshire, we are not getting any money in the funding rounds. I mean, I just lay out, I'm not responsible for council tax. That's the county councils, not myself. So I have no say on this. But in the funding rounds, even the transport rounds, Lincolnshire is getting nothing. We are the poor relation yet again. So no doubt in the councils across the country, which are not Labour controlled, hard decisions will have to be made, unfortunately.
Thank you ever so much, Dame Andrea Jenkins, who, of course, is the Reform UK Mayor for Greater Lincolnshire. Right, we're going to take a little break now, but when I come back, I'm already being inundated with messages, both on WhatsApp and on SMUS, and hopefully I'll have plenty of calls to sift through as well. 03444991000 is the number to dial if you'd like to talk with me. I would like to talk with you. Yes, you. You've not phoned before, have you? And you have been ranting at the radio about Rachel Reeves. So why don't you share? Because sharing is caring. It's your normal network rate. I'll see you after this.
I was back in the UK for only 5 days last week, and during that time there were 3 absolute horrors. There was the unbelievable bloody stabbing of an innocent dog walker. There was a court case about another horrific crime that all came to a conclusion that involved an asylum seeking related incident, and now we have this, which happened as I was flying out of the country.
We have got forensics still conducting their supporting the investigation by examining the train. The train station itself is still shut. There are trains passing through, but they aren't stopping at the station itself. But I actually got here last night around just after 9 o'clock, which the incident had been dealt with at that point in time. There was a phenomenal police presence here. There must have been 20 to 30 police cars, around 10 ambulances still at that point dealing with casualties, and also four fire engines. But there was a very, very...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back. Now, you know it's coming up to that time of year where we all have to prematurely prepare for the big commercial fest that is the celebration of the birth of our Lord Jesus Christ. And it means that all of the big corporations are going to start rolling out their adverts and teasing us with clips to show us how special this year's campaign is going to be. And it always kicks off, doesn't it, with John Lewis. So shall we have a look at this year's offering? Here we go.
Take you down, deep down where the love lives. Follow me down, deep down where the love lives.
Oh, there you go. The Christmas spirit. Pound Shop Colin Firth teaching his teenage son how to gurn like a 90s raver. But at least one might say John Lewis have realised who their target demographic is. People who partied through the 90s, which of course was the greatest decade in our history. Let me know your thoughts on that one as well. Talking about hearing people's thoughts, shall we hear some now from Herbie, who's in Harrow? Good morning, Herbie.
Good morning, Alex. What a lovely morning. 26 minutes of dribble-drabble, blaming everybody else but themselves.
I thought you meant me then, 26 minutes of dribble-drabble.
No, not quite, Alex. You're on good stead this morning. No problems. The thing is that she was there admitting that there's trouble ahead for us and we're going to pay the price for their mismanagement, the way they wasted money, spent money. Nothing about the illegal immigrants and hotels that are costing us absolute fortunes. You know, Chagos Islands, financing this, financing the Brazilian road for a conference that's going to, God knows, create how much carbon footprint. They're completely out of control. They do not wish to admit that they're at fault. They're blaming everybody else but themselves. They haven't got a damn clue, Alex, what to do. They're in trouble and there's no way out and they know it.
And this is what really sticks in my core when it comes to a government pointing the finger everywhere else, pointing a finger at circumstance and saying, well, it's because Russia invaded Ukraine. Well, it's because of supply chains that have been disrupted due to Donald Trump's tariffs. Well, it's because of Donald Trump's tariffs. FYI, we didn't get them because of Brexit. Well, it's because of Brexit. FYI, you've never done anything about Brexit. But actually seeking to regain the regulatory orbit of Brussels. And like you said, they pay lip service things like, well, we're having to pay more on defence. You're supposed to be doing these things because you're a government, and you're supposed to balance the books and decide which departments require extra funding and which ones have to see cuts. And it seems to me, in the first year of government, they say they inherited a £22 billion deficit, which has never been proven, can I just say. But they've added to that, oh, well, it's the markets. No, it is you as Chancellor, because your job is to look at what's going on in the markets, look at circumstance and go, do you know what, Ed? We probably can't afford to be buying all of this net zero kit from China at the moment, so you're just going to have to put a cork in your personal net zero zealotry. Or say to doctors and nurses, sorry, we can give you some degree of pay rise, or we'll give you one in 3 years' time, but right now the country's economically on its knees. But no, they didn't do that, did they? Herbie, thank you ever so much. If you want to make like Herbie and have your sonorous tones play out on the airwaves, you can register your interest to get involved with the conversation at any point, and the wonderful Alicia will take your call, take your details and give you a bell back when the time is good and ready. 0344 499 1000 is the number to dial. 8722 on the texts as well. Remember to write the word talk before you text, and 0344 499 1000 is also the number for WhatsApp. Okay, going to take a short break, but buckle yourselves in, because after you come back it's going to be the roller coaster of the state of the UK finances. That's after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, hello there. Do you know, while I was sitting on the train this morning, rumbling my way from the West Country into London to be here in the throne and the towers of Talk Common Sense, instead of worrying about who might stab me at the next station, I was more worried about how much tax I'm going to have to pay, because one thing is inevitable. We are going to all face some sort of punishment. That is, the we being the working we. Because we didn't really hear much, did we, about the unworking we? No, we heard that there are far too many young people who are now NEETs, not in employment, education or training. That's because they're sitting at home having anxiety attacks while watching box sets. But we didn't really hear how she's going to finally push through those much-needed cuts to welfare that even the IMF have warned that Britain needs to make if we don't face financial disaster. We know her backbenchers are not going to suddenly mollify and be party to those. So, you know, where are we going to get extra money from? Well, it's me and you, isn't it? It's on our income tax. Surely, when challenged again and again if she's going to break that commitment, she didn't answer, which, let's be fair, when a politician doesn't answer a question, we all know what the answer is, the one that they don't want to say out loud publicly. Let's speak now to James Athey, who's an economic commentator and fixed income fund manager at Marlborough. Good morning to you, James. OK, what were your big take-homes from this sort of precursor, the context, if you will, the prequel to the nightmare at number 11?
Morning, Alex. Not really much to take away beyond the fact that there was not much content, as you say. I don't think the Chancellor wanted to be drawn on any specifics. I think the way that she spoke out against the idea of austerity, unfortunately for investors and the UK economy, means that spending cuts are not likely to be on the docket. To be honest, even when they attempted spending cuts previously, the left side of the Labour Party roundly refused to engage, and those went by the wayside. So it does look to be relying heavily on tax rises to try and deal with what is increasingly a worrying deficit situation.
I mean, as someone who advises people on personal finances, what sort of messages would you be giving to clients today ahead of what looks like doom and gloom being foretold come the end of this month?
It's obviously very difficult, right? I mean, obviously you don't know the specifics of each individual and you don't know the specifics of the policy which are going to come out. There's not really anything you can do to prepare for an increase in income tax if that's what we're facing. If you're a lawyer and you're currently in a limited liability partnership, it may well be that you have to pay national insurance going forward. What can you really do about that today to try and protect yourself or sort of offset that? There really isn't anything. So it's very difficult. We're going to have to look at actually what's announced on the 26th, and people then are going to have to seek advice for their own specific financial situation.
What she did say, however, she doesn't want to go back to the dark days of austerity. Like you said, it doesn't seem like she's going to be making any sort of commitment to cut anything, other than she did make two references. One was saying that she's going to look to cut quangos. Well, they actually created 11 new quangos last year during the King's speech, and the one that they said they would scrap, NHS England, is still going strong, because apparently to get rid of it is probably going to cost more in terms of paying out redundancies than actually keeping it. So, so far, not really making much progress on that front. And we also know that they've tried to get the welfare bill through Parliament, but it was Labour's own backbenchers that wouldn't stomach it. And they are going to potentially face, again, a big revolt on the left, saying we don't believe that any sort of disability benefits should be cut, even though we know that there's a huge uptick in how much we're spending, particularly when it comes to those people claiming for things like mental health conditions. Now, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage thinks that the markets will come knocking not once but twice over the next couple of budgets, saying this is not sustainable, you can't tax your way out of this, and that could lead to an early election. Do you think that he's reading the runes right?
Yeah, I mean, Winston Churchill said that a nation trying to tax itself into prosperity is like a man standing in a bucket and trying to lift himself up by the handle, and I would firmly agree with that. When it comes to the idea of austerity, this just fits with sort of modern politics where you use pejoratives to really dissuade any kind of a debate on the subject. The reality is that around a quarter of working age people are collecting some form of DWP benefit currently, and the increase in those health-related benefits that you described since 2019 is unbelievable. It's stark, and it stands out in any context, including internationally as well as historically. That suggests that that is an obvious area that needs focus. Whether Mr. Farage is correct that we'll get an election as early as 2027, of course, with acts of Parliament having changed the election cycle, in recent decades, that's always more difficult to make that call. But I do think that economically speaking, increasing tax to try and pay for an unaffordable spending sort of program is not going to lead to success in the medium term. And we've already seen that this Chancellor has had to come back once and twice to try and deal with the fact that her policies have not worked to this point, and if she continues to sort of go down the same path, they will continue to not work.
No, I couldn't agree more. We've already seen the wealth and capital flights from the UK. That suggests to me that sort of point at the Laffer curve where it all starts going to hell in a handcart is already upon us. James Athey, thank you ever so much for coming on the programme and explaining matters that I constantly find very difficult to wrap my head around, other than knowing that we're not in a good place, are we, financially, in this country. Before we go to break, I have some breaking news for you. And that is that Stephen Yaxley Lennon, a.k.a. Tommy Robinson, has been found not guilty at Westminster Magistrates Court of the apparent terror offence of failing to provide police with the PIN to his mobile phone when he was apprehended at the Channel Tunnel in Folkestone in July last year. So Tommy Robinson, a.k.a. Stephen Yaxley Lennon, is not guilty. Right, going to take a short break now, but when we come back, it's a topic that actually is a sort of passion of mine. That's probably the wrong phrase when I tell you it's pornography. Passion, not in that sense. I have a huge bugbear with the state of pornography and how it is affecting both young and old minds in this country and across the West. We're going to be discussing new regulation that is coming out just after this.
Robust police response. Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now. Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Now, before we have a very sanguine discussion about pornography, let's do a call. Richard is in Wakefield. Good morning to you, Richard.
Good morning, Alex. Splendid show as usual.
Thank you.
I awoke to your wonderful rant yesterday, which I agree with every word. I'm not, by the way, far right. I'm just far from fed up. I just thought you'd like to know what you're up against, because I stumbled across in X yesterday a post from a lady who lives in the Cotswolds, which has an ethnic population of less than 2%.
Yeah.
And she was replying to something that Elton Musk had said about perhaps putting 1,000 illegals in a village of 500 people. And her response was along the following lines. I actually live in a small English village. It's total Cotswold, what Elon Musk is saying. We are not hobbits under siege. We are ordinary people. How rude to patronise us. It's all fear-mongering. Now, compared with what you said on Monday, would you care to educate that lady?
Well, do you know what? I'm a lady who lives in a small Cotswolds village as well, right? I actually chose to move back to where I come from, which is the West Country, although I actually come from Gloucester, which is a gnarly old city. But I chose to move out of London because I no longer felt safe here. And I was having a good old rant about the fact that now train journeys don't seem safe. But I tell you what, everywhere where I live, is going to vote Lib Dem, because they live in this sort of protected, cocooned world where they go, oh, all these people coming over on boats. Isn't it sad? Because it's not on their street. It's an arm's length problem. They've got no idea what other members of the population are facing on their high streets, in their homes, what's happening to their kids, that their girls are being harassed. And actually, what's quite funny is she was quote tweeting a post that had Elon Musk, when being interviewed by Joe Rogan, talking about a village just outside of Swindon, which is only a half-hour drive away from me, where a load of Afghan migrants last year were brought in. And temporarily homed. And what happened as a result of this is that a donkey, a Ginny donkey, who is very popular in the village, called Maisie, was gang attacked and found bleeding out of, I don't know what I can say at 10 to 11 in the morning. But yeah, the donkey was a victim of a sex attack.
I think what frustrated me at the same time was I'm fairly old, 76. I walk a dog and I live a half a mile away from 350 illegals in a 4-star hotel. Yeah. So I've had to change my dog route, and I don't live in London. So it just annoys me that it's this apathy that's going to bring this country down.
Yeah, I did used to think, Richard, well, do you know what? We should start putting the illegal migrants in the places where the Lib Dems are sort of prominent. But now I live in one of those places. I'm like, no, don't. Because also I sort of think, don't wreck more and more of the country if we can help it. What we've got to do is just get on top of the whole problem at large. Richard, thank you ever so much for your call. And I wasn't expecting to refer to Donkeygate, but you can look it up. Don't take my word for it. Look it up. OK, now I'm going to move on to a subject that is very important to me. It's a subject that I've been campaigning against for a very long time, and this is pornography, because I'm pleased to say that now vile and dangerous strangulation pornography is going to be banned. Non-fatal strangulation is already an offence in its own right, but it's not currently illegal to show it online. Let's speak to Joe Bartosh, assistant editor of the Critic and co-author of Pornocracy. Joe, it's always a pleasure to speak to you, because my word, I mean, I'm pleased actually that finally I'm beginning to see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. Ever since they brought in age restrictions and you've got to put in personal details on Pornhub, the amount of traffic to the site has dropped by 77%, which is interesting, isn't it? It means most men, and perhaps women out there, are going, oh, we don't trust these porn sites to put our personal details, like credit card details, in. Well, why do you trust them, right? That the content you're looking at isn't of someone who is under duress, isn't someone who's trafficked, isn't the sort of content which, frankly, should be illegal. Thank goodness that we're now watching this next step take place. We've already had the rough sex defence obliterated. Good. A man can't turn around anymore and say, oh, sorry, she died accidentally because we were having rough sex. That was abysmal. That should never have been allowed to be used as a defence in court. It seems to me at least, it's not going as far as I'd like, but at least the world is waking up to the harms created by mass industrialised, especially user-generated pornography.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm so pleased to see that finally the threat from pornography is starting to get taken seriously. Because when it comes to strangulation, we know that 40% of young women in the UK, it's something they've experienced. It is virtually unknown for older generations of women. So this is clearly something that has been normalised and that has come out of pornography. So this idea that, you know, somehow what happens on screen stays on screen is utter nonsense. Obviously, it influences behaviour. I mean, if it didn't, then adverts wouldn't be a thing, would they? I mean, it's so clear. So, yeah, I'm delighted to see this. I don't think it necessarily goes far enough. I mean, obviously, I would say that, but that is, you know, it is still the case that... Oh, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, it is a step, isn't it? I mean, what I think should happen, I don't know whether you agree with me or not. Now, I'm not exactly modern-day Mary Whitehouse, but perhaps I am. But I don't think that we should have any sort of user-generated pornographic content at all. If you can't have people making moonshine and selling it from their driveways because it might be a threat to public health, why on earth do we let anyone film, upload and watch videos of extreme content? And going back to Pornhub, you'll no doubt be well aware of the legal case brought against Visa when their platform was being used to monetize videos by somebody whose rape video had been put online on Pornhub and watched lots of times. And when Visa made Pornhub do an audit of their content, because they're supposed to have people who look at this, but clearly they don't, they found that over 13.5 million videos, only 3 million of them were not depicting acts of violence and underage paedophilia. 10 million videos, over 80% had to be removed overnight. Why on earth have we still got a situation where you could have somebody trafficking a woman, abusing an ex-girlfriend or boyfriend, drugging someone and raping them and assaulting them, filming someone in a clandestine manner, you name it, all manners of industrialised sexual abuse is still able to be put online and paid for? Is it not the case that we just need to turn around and go, this industry needs to be regulated properly?
Yeah. I mean, I think part of the problem is that tech more generally is treated as if it's some sort of, you know, special enclave, if you like. So when it comes to, you know, there's a real panic around whether platforms are publishers or whether they have any responsibility. You know, you think if there were an oil spill, you would expect, for example, you know, with the Deepwater Horizon scandal, BP will find sort of millions, billions to clear that up. Now, what the pornography industry has done is it has done that on a social level. It has absolutely ruined young people's minds. It has destroyed sort of generations from having normal, healthy sex. And, you know, I'm not a Mary Whitehouse-style prude either. I think people should have lots of happy, consensual, fun sex, just not film it. And, you know, we're actually seeing, you know, the sort of plummeting birth rates. That's clearly a result of pornography. So, you know, actually the tech companies need to take some sort of responsibility for what they've allowed to happen on their platforms. And we need to stop treating them as if they're sort of defenders of freedom of speech and start regulating them like any other industry.
It's not freedom of speech. I'm sorry. If you were walking down the street and a woman is being gang raped and you stand and watch it, you're partaking in a crime. It doesn't matter if there's a screen in between you and the content you're watching. And I would love one day for there to be research into how many women, and we mustn't forget young gay men in all of this, because when you look at what goes in that community, I worry desperately, especially about young men who are introduced into that community and a bit naive and are being exploited. But when I think, I'd love to find out how many of the women who are, that, you know, men or women might watch and think, oh, she's really enjoying it, she's doing that consensually. How many actually are? Or how many have debts to pay? How many have mental illness? How many have been trafficked? How many have been subjected to abuse? How many might not even know they're being filmed? How many were filmed consensually with a previous partner who is then putting something up online much later? And you talk about the impact. I mean, I'm sort of talking about this from a criminal perspective. You talk about the impact on the population at large. Well, here's a fact for you, men out there. Did you know that now 1/3 of men under the age of 40 suffer from erectile dysfunction. It used to be under 1%.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, what's really chilling about that is it's not even sort of normal erectile dysfunction. They can have an erection just watching porn, not with a flesh and blood partner. I mean, if that doesn't show you that it's warping our minds, then I don't think anything will.
It's, I mean, I remember looking at a brilliant study done by Servation for the female magazine of the Daily Mail, which was asking teenagers about their sexual attitudes. And one of the statistics that broke my heart was 1/3 of young teenage girls have engaged within extreme adult sexual activity. I won't explain exactly what, but I think we can probably assume that we know, without even having their first ever kiss.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, when you look at you know, sort of performers, everyone sort of likes to be outraged by the likes of Bonnie Blue and Lily Phillips, and you know, they are awful. What they are doing is absolutely terrible. But at the same time, they were both exposed to pornography when they weren't even teenagers, when they were 11 years old. They are both on record of saying that. And Lily Phillips has even said that friends of her father's were the first to sign up to her site. I mean, that is just so wrong. And it just absolutely, yeah, it is heartbreaking that clearly they are going on to replicate something sort of pretty tragic that they would have seen at a very young age. And they're now sort of, it's a fairly common thing with trauma that you sort of, you replay what's happened to you. And I think that's what we're seeing with a lot of this stuff on OnlyFans, actually. When it comes to OnlyFans at the moment, there's a real push to talk about financial inclusion. So their chief executive, who rather cannily on their part is a woman, which I can't help thinking is a PR thing, is now starting to complain that OnlyFans performers, you know, have a right to have bank accounts and all the rest of it. And yes, of course they do. But at the same time, by using the language of financial inclusion, they're clearly trying to stop any sort of efforts, as would happen with Pornhub. So the campaign against Pornhub, which was led by Layla Micklethwait, which got 90%.
Oh, she's amazing. I love Layla.
She is amazing. I mean, that got sort of most of their content removed. So they're proactively trying to make sure that the same thing can't happen to them by talking about financial exclusion. And it is disgraceful. I mean, we know that there are hot houses, effectively, where women are forced into doing OnlyFans. Right. And even, sorry.
Joe, I'm actually going to have to stop it there because we're at the top of the hour. That means I've got to take an advert break. But please, please continue fighting the good fight. I'm there to support you whatever way possible. If you're a man listening to that and you log on to these user-generated content websites, ask yourself this. If that was your sister, your mother, your aunt, your best female friend, your female neighbour partaking, would you be worried about their welfare and ask what's gone wrong in their life? OK, going to take a short break now. Don't go anywhere. I am back just after this.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back to the show. Now I have a very important piece of news and I all want you to take a moment to listen to this. You will know that that horrible, horrific knife attack on the train to Cambridgeshire on Saturday, that there was a member of staff for LNER, London North Eastern Railway, who it was reported really put his life on the line and jumped to defend a lot of passengers. Coming face to face with the knifeman and suffering from horrific injuries as a result of that bravery. And he had been in a critical condition in hospital. He remains in hospital, but I believe his condition is now stable, thank the Lord. But he has just been named. So I want us all to take a moment to think of Samir Zitouni. Samir Zitouni. In a moment of crisis, says his colleague, Sam did not hesitate as he stepped forward to protect those around him. Samir, we love you and you deserve the George Cross, my man. You deserve recognition. You stay healthy in hospital. You have a load of TLC. I hope that the public send him flowers and grapes and cards and tell him how much we appreciate him, because that sort of bravery is vanishingly rare. What a wonderful man Samir is, and I cannot wait to see him out of hospital and receiving the love and the recognition that he very much deserves. So it brings a tear to my eye when I think about people with that sort of mettle. They are a rarity indeed. Good old Samir Zitouni. OK, well, sticking with that subject, how safe are trains in the United Kingdom? Because in the wake of that horrific mass stabbing attempt on Saturday night, we have statistics about the number of assaults taking place on our railway network. And quite astonishingly, 10 years ago, 2014 to 2015, there were around 3,000 recorded cases annually of offences being committed on trains. That is now over 10,000 in the past year. That is 28 assaults per day, 11 of which are sexual assaults. What is going on? Let's speak to my favourite, the veteran, the OG, the Don, Mr. Trevor Kavanagh, former political editor of The Sun. Good morning, Trevor.
Good to be with you, Alex.
What is going on? Because we can look at this through the prism of cuts in police. We can look at this through the prism of maybe austerity. I think there is something else because, you know, we've always had knives in this country. We've always had trains in this country. We didn't have to have knife arches. We didn't have to have stop and search. So why is it in 2025 so many people are essentially going out and stabbing other people?
Well, it's difficult to answer that specifically, but before I do, I'd like to echo your words about the hero train guard who came to the rescue of so many members of the public. And having once briefly been threatened with a knife, I can tell you it is absolutely terrifying. And the fact that he more or less voluntarily went into the area of danger, ran into danger himself, and suffered grievously as a result is a tremendous tribute to that courage on his, that you mentioned. Yeah. As for the explosion of assaults and violence and stabbings on public transport, basically that's a reflection of society at large in the cities and towns of this country. Knives are carried routinely, not just by adults with malice aforethought in their minds, but even in school and school children. We've had, in fact, recently the case of a teenager being stabbed to death by another teenager in the vicinity of the school. So, you know, I think that one of the ways that we could combat this is to use stop and search, not necessarily in the form that is opposed so bitterly by the left because it is allegedly racist, but indiscriminately and spontaneously. For instance, I think we should put up metal detectors around the exits of tube stations every now and again, or some other point at which large numbers emerge and can be identified. And before they can get away, they are going through the metal detectors. I think if you did that every now and again, not at one particular point all the time, but just every now and again, you would stop people carrying knives if they were stopped in their tracks like that.
But I wonder as well, I mean, there's got to be something else we can do. Not to sound a bit like David Cameron, hug a hoodie, I actually see woke at the heart of a lot of these problems. I think there's been, again, the sort of woke element of not doing stop and search because, oh, you might be racially profiling someone. There's also been this woke two-tier policing when it comes to psychosis-inducing drugs and which communities the police are prepared to go after for dealing and possession. There's also been a wokeification of some of the most horrific online content, from drill music to these grievance narratives, to violent videos online, a glorification of violence. We know we've got increasing psychosis rates, particularly within a certain community, which is then, I think you're 10 times more likely if you have a predisposition towards psychosis, if you then smoke cannabis, to actually have a psychotic episode. And if you have psychosis, you're 10 times more likely to end up in prison. But we're still not talking about those things, again, for fear, it seems to me, of being painted with the accusation of being xenophobic or racist.
Well, yes, and we're also suffering the problem, I think, of fatherless families. This is a long and deep-seated problem in society generally, not just in any particular minority, but in society generally, where there are far more single parents in Britain than in many countries in Europe. And I think that reflects itself in the way that children grow up, often being disciplined not by their parents, but by their peer group, which in some cases are gangs. And so knife carrying is a way of life. And this is coupled with other forms of delinquency is the answer, I suppose, in terms of pot smoking and skunk smoking, which is not just pot, it's really quite a powerful mind-altering drug. And the point that psychiatrists make is that once you alter the mind in that way, there is no guarantee that it will return to the way it was before.
No, I think we definitely need a national conversation about this. I recently wrote a Substack on it, but I still don't think we're ready to have that conversation out loud. Let's indeed have a conversation out loud instead about the BBC, because let's remind ourselves of the clip that is so evidently doctored by Panorama.
Yes, I think
we're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
I mean, look, Trev, people listening to this know full well you and I are exchanging opinions, but this isn't a matter of opinion on Panorama. As far as I can tell, this is the deliberate deception through doctoring actuality.
Yes, and as I say, this story, if it weren't for the violence and other catastrophes going on at the same time, would be the biggest story of the day. This is the BBC, our national broadcaster, doctoring evidence deliberately in order to malign the President of the United States of America. I mean, all journalists do things with copy and quotes, which is intended to abbreviate what someone's saying without altering the substance of their intentions. That's called subbing or sub-editing. So this is something totally different. This is the deliberate and systematic and quite complicated distortion of the events that took place, which reflect extremely badly on Donald Trump, or did at the time until this emerged as being the real story. And it has been cast in order to make him look as if he was trying to rouse rebels into violence. This is the incoming President of the United States, in fact, trying to douse the flames.
No, indeed. And what do you think the outcome should be of this? I mean, people are saying Tim Davies should be the one whose head should roll. I'm not really hearing much about the editorial staff of that particular episode of Panorama, although I have personally looked into them. But what I think is likely to happen if Donald Trump does file some sort of lawsuit against the BBC, and let's not forget that especially BBC World is available throughout the planet, so could well have had an American audience, is if there is some sort of libel levelled against the BBC, the likelihood is, Trevor, that those of us who pay the licence fee, which I still do, we're the ones who have to pick up the tab.
Well, I'm seriously thinking of following Charles Moore of The Telegraph and ceasing to pay my licence fee after this, and I think millions might feel the same way. I mean, this has been revealed in a report by Michael Prescott, who I know very well as the former political editor of the Sunday Times, a man of unimpeachable integrity, who is outraged by the way this has not just been carried out by Panorama, but the way that the BBC hierarchy, including the chairman, has refused even to address the situation until the point where Michael Prescott's report has been leaked and has become part of the public domain. It is only now that they're looking at what was an outrageous breach of journalistic integrity by the BBC, quite unforgivable, irreparable, and I think there will be consequences, not just from the board of the BBC, but from the White House, because this has vindicated the view of the White House and President Trump and his family in particular, that there is a fake media out there. Well, we did know that, but we didn't think it included the BBC.
Yeah, no, I agree. There needs to be at some point with the BBC the final thing, the final straw that makes real change happen, and it seems yet to have come to pass. Let's hope that this incident will actually make the scales fall away from people's eyes and the BBC finally face some sort of accountability. Talking about accountability, Rachel Reeves not taking any in her deliberate contextualisation of the doom and gloom she's going to level against the rest of us at the end of the month. I mean, this did seem to me to be an exercise in fluffing us ready for what is going to be a pretty gruesome budget. But it's again, she blames everyone else but herself. The buck stops with you, Rachel, surely.
Well, I think the buck stopped with Rachel Reeves when she delivered her last budget. That was the moment. If she felt, excuse me, if she felt genuinely that there was a 20 billion black hole, should have taken the measures at the beginning of a new government with a huge majority to rectify it by cutting the vast welfare spending bill and the national debt that goes with it. And if she did none of those things, in fact, she balked at the very opportunity that the government tried to adopt to cut heating allowances and so on. Very badly chosen examples, admittedly, but they have no will whatsoever to cut the welfare bill, which is crippling this country. And until they do, they will never be able to cut taxes, and in fact will always have to increase taxes incrementally, or in this case in the budget, quite substantially by an estimated 2p in the pound across the board for all income tax.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps to me, what were the most standout points of her speech were the things that she did not say when she's sort of addressing the culpability for why we're in such an economic mess. Of course, it's all the Tories, Vladimir Putin, throwing a bit of Brexit, some supply chains, China, Trump, of course, and tariffs. You know, it's basically the right wing are to blame. And yet she doesn't seem to recognise that things like the sheer cost of illegal immigration, the welfare bill of foreign nationals who, quite frankly, we shouldn't be propping up. She didn't seem to talk about any of those things. I think exactly the things that she did not mention are the areas where the general public are most likely to be pointing the finger of blame.
Yes, and not to mention the cost that goes with illegal immigration. I mean, it is vast, and the crime that goes with that too. But the thing is that they keep blaming everyone else, as you say. They blame Brexit, they blame the last Tory government. But they've now been in office for nearly 18 months. And they're running out of excuses. And I think the opinion polls are revealing that the public is fed up with them blaming everyone else and refusing to take any blame of their own disastrous policies, which have led to many of the problems we're facing today.
Now, there's been a bit of sort of, let's say, prequels and sequels to Rachel Reeves' contextualisation. The prequel coming from Nigel Farage, who has said he will not be cutting taxes until he manages to stabilise the country's economy, should he be our next Prime Minister. Kemi Badenoch basically saying that it was a load of waffle, a waffle bomb. I mean, it does seem to me that whoever is going to wrest control of the nation's budget, it's still not going to be good news for a very long time to come.
No, I'm afraid that's true. And we are in for a fairly bleak time. You've seen the pound has slumped against all foreign currencies. That's as a result of what Rachel Reeves said this morning, and it will probably slump further after the budget. That's not good news for our exporters and importers, or for the consumers. I think that Nigel Farage's speech, to be fair to him, actually, is a breath of fresh air, because he's finally addressing the elephant in the room, which is that if he were to win power, he is unlikely to have an overwhelming majority, but he needs to have policies ready to go which show that he is ready to govern. And I think the economy, apart from migration, which is, of course, the key issue when it comes to reform's ascent in the polls, the economy is really the biggest thing apart from that. And so far, we've heard very little from him on that. Now, at last, we see that he recognizes that we cannot sustain the huge national debt that's crushing our economy at the moment.
No, indeed. I mean, I think a lot of people listening to what Nigel Farage had to say would be, well, look, if we can make those cuts in welfare, if the people who are not contributing are the ones being held to account, whomever they will be, then we might be a bit more prepared to shoulder some of the burden. Let's talk now about Rochdale grooming ringleader who's been banned from returning to Britain. I mean, great. He's fled the country. The police were supposed to be doing checkups to make sure he's at home and not doing bad things. Well, the checkups couldn't have been that watertight because he has absconded. And the response is, well, great, you've gone out, but you're not going to be allowed back in. The point is, though, if he's fled to Europe, he could just be sitting in the Costa del Sol living his best life. It doesn't seem to me like he's facing justice.
No, and I wish we had stopped calling them groomers. I mean, this man is a rapist. He raped a 13-year-old and impregnated a 13-year-old, among many other offences that he committed, and was struggling to avoid deportation. We should have deported him. He shouldn't have done a runner. We should have deported him years ago.
Yeah.
And the immigration tribunals, which decide this, the Home Office itself, decided that he couldn't be deported because, as he claimed, his son would lose a role model. I mean, where does that sort of justification come from? So it's good that he's not being allowed to come back, but he should never have been allowed to stay here in the first place once he'd been convicted.
No, I totally agree. And I think actually if we did turn around to Pakistan and say, we want to send all these people back to you, and I think most of Pakistan looks very dimly upon this sort of behaviour, I think Pakistan would probably play ball, quite frankly, especially if they knew that there was something at stake, for example, foreign aid. I don't know why we're not being more assertive over this. No doubt it's got something to do with the ECHR, of which it's the 75th birthday today. You'll be pleased to know, Trevor. Happy birthday to the European Convention. Not so many happy returns. But hopefully you will return, because I always love catching up with you, Trev. Trevor Kavanagh there, former political editor of The Sun, the king. Right, we're going to take a short break now. After that, I'd like to speak to some of you guys. 03444 99 1000 is the number to call. It's your normal network rate. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp. Leave me a voice note on WhatsApp, or 87222 is the number to text. If you're going to text, put talk before your message. I'm back after this.
about 250 or so knife-enabled homicides a year. It's far too high. Now, there were reductions in police numbers after 2010 because of the financial mess the previous Labour government left behind. But when I was police minister in the last couple of years of the last government, we recruited a lot more police officers, and we actually left government a year and a half ago with record ever numbers of police. It was 149,769 on March the 31st, 2024. Unfortunately, since then, under Labour, it has started going down.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back to the show. Let's do some calls and some messages. Now, you'll have to excuse me if I have to keep going, what? I'm squinting at the screen because my earpiece has gone into Dalek mode for some inexplicable reason. But I'll try and do my best to listen to all of your eloquent points. And let's begin with Tarquin, who's in London. Good morning, Tarquin.
Testing 1, 2. Am I a Dalek or what?
Yes, you are, my darling, I'm afraid to say. You do certainly sound like you need a Hall's throat soother or something, or that you're sort of speaking to me from the bottom of a Hamas tunnel. But carry on. I'll do my best to understand.
Okay, well, bear that in mind, Alex. Now, okay, what it is, I really think for the BBC, just boycotting the BBC now is not enough. I think we've got to the Rubicon time where they have crossed that river. They have now proven to the world with evidence that they have a propaganda wing and the rest of it is an entertainment corporation. So yes, we love their comedy over the years and their drama, wonderful, but I think they have to split off the BBC news wing and have it promptly abolished. It is no longer fit for purpose. It is actually misleading, misreporting, is committing fraud, and I would highly encourage people to show their disdain for this by proving, by just not actually buying a license anymore, not renewing a license anymore, and then hopefully the penny will drop that way. Because I really think that they're just part of the We'll Learn Lessons Brigade, Alex. I just don't think they're going to do anything. So
well, you're right. I agree with you on some level, but the problem is, of course, the licence fee covers anybody who has a television set and wishes to watch live television.
Alex, it does not. Let me just the letter of the law on this. If you do not watch any live TV, and it's perfectly possible with everyone having Netflix and YouTube to not watch any live TV. So you don't watch. Just imagine. Here's a scenario: we're sitting on the sofa, cups of tea. Everyone, all of us listening to this now, right? Don't watch any live BBC. Don't watch any live ITV. Just nothing that's live coming over the airwaves. Okay, and also do not install iPlayer and there's only one exception to that, but nobody watches it anyway. S4C, but you can watch that on iPlayer. So the best thing is don't have it. Then you are perfectly legitimately able.
I get that, Tarquin. But what about I like watching the Formula One live?
Well, there you go. Well, you have to pay. You have to buy it then if that's what you want to do.
No, but see, I think, look, I've got a slightly different approach to this, OK? What I would say is actually having a state broadcaster. Some people might think it's a relic, but actually it's something that lots of other countries desperately desire to have. In fact, you look at the amount of countries now putting a substantial amount of money into having a state broadcaster, be it Russia Today or CTV or the Turkish one, TNT, or whatever it's called. I forget which one's TNT and TRT. But, you know, it's a sort of very desirable entity. But my view is this: there should be no taxation without representation. If I were to get on top of all this, if I were culture minister, what I would do is turn around and say to the BBC, I'm sorry, but your budget is instantly going to be halved. You get to have 2 TV channels and a handful of radio stations. Get out of the podcast space. You have no right to be there. I get annoyed when I go on to BBC Sounds to listen back to archive content from Radio 4, and it's great to have that library, to see all sorts of washed up, nobody cares, has-been celebrities yapping off about something at my expense. The BBC don't need to be doing that stuff. But I also think from now on, if you're going to pay tax for something, you should be able to have a say. The next Director General of the BBC should be given that position as a result of a campaign, a competition where they have to lay out the manifestos, and those people who do pay a licence fee get to go online and decide which Director General they want. And those people should also be able to routinely make their opinion known, what they don't like about the BBC. Because the thing is this, the majority of the population of the United Kingdom are sensible-minded right-wingers and patriots. The majority of the people who staff the BBC are mad Marxists. And what we need to do, and it's interesting, in the newspapers today, you've got Sarah Montague, the former Today programme presenter. Now, she won a gender pay tribunal against the BBC when she realised she was being paid far less than her then colleagues, people like John Humphreys. But she's turned around and said the problem actually at the BBC is a problem of classism. And I would agree. Once upon a time, journalism wasn't so-called a profession as such. You could go and train at your local newspaper in the age of 14, 15 as an apprenticeship, learn your shorthand, turn up and do proper journalism, which is the sort of routine that made journalists such as Rod Liddell, Kelvin Mackenzie, Jeremy Clarkson sensible right-wing people. What we've had is a professionalisation of journalism. So now you have to go get a university degree in it. And then you end up at the BBC and it's very nepotistic. When I went to journalism school, I was the only person who didn't have some bloodline in broadcasting. And so you end up with this extremely nepotistic profession where they all self-congratulate. They all have the same extremely slim Hampstead point of view. And the general public have no recourse over this. I think if we were to get the BBC over the chopping block and say, your budget is halved and from now on you're accountable to the public, we might get somewhere.
Absolutely. Here to all of the above, Alex. Quite agree with you. But let's distill it back down to what the way that they spliced and diced that quote from Donald Trump. They are no longer fit for purpose. They are misreporting. The news search section must be disbanded today, forthwith.
Well, certainly heads need to roll. It's not okay that when people are in public service employment, they seem to be able to get away with things that wouldn't happen in the private sector. Tarquin, it's always wonderful catching up with you, and I'm glad I managed to understand what you said, despite the sort of strange distortion going on in my oral cavity. Let's speak quickly to Dennis, who's in Woking. Good morning, Dennis.
Good morning, Alex. How are you?
I'm all right, my love. How are you?
Yeah, fine, thank you very much. I'm fuming with this BBC.
Right.
I refuse now. I'll stop my direct debit for TV licence. I refuse to pay a corrupt organisation. And it's not the first time that they've done this, Panorama. John Sweeney, I think his name is. He was the head of Panorama. I believe now he's on gardening leave. He tried to stitch up Tommy Robinson.
All right, yeah.
I don't know if you've seen the video, but he had a girl that used to work for him, and he sacked her. And Panorama and John Sweeney got her into a pub, and unbeknown to them, that she had a hidden camera. And the things that he said that he was trying to do to stitch up Tommy Robinson.
Right, saying provocative things in the hope that he would agree or say the same. Dennis, you make very good points. I mean, I often think that many people who are editors at the BBC, and I've been subjected to the BBC previous times. I was a VIP trainee there, and I jacked it all in to go and work in politics instead. Such was my hatred for the organisation that I was working for, the department I was working in. But I've done lots of BBC programmes myself, and you do realise there's this almost editorial left-wing bullying of people if you're from the right wing of politics. There's a sneering, snide attitude where you're the only one on a panel. You're made to sit right at the very end. But you know what I say? I just go on regardless, even if they put me on with Alistair Campbell. Thank you ever so much, Dennis. Fantastic to take your call. I've got some breaking news before we go to advertisements, which is that former US Vice President Dick Cheney has died from complications of pneumonia and cardiac and vascular disease, according to his family. In a statement, his family said the 84-year-old was surrounded by his wife, Lynn, daughters Liz and Mary, and other family members. There you go. Former US Vice President Dick Cheney has passed away, aged 84. OK, we've got a cracking story coming up for you after the break with our very own Isabel Oakeshott. Don't go anywhere.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello there and welcome back and welcome aboard the brilliant, wonderful, gorgeous, erudite Isabel Oakeshott, fearless journalist, one of the best in the biz. That's why we keep her and no one else has her. Good morning to you, Isabel. Now, you've done an absolutely extraordinary interview with a former migrant hotel manager who was arrested by 10 riot cops storming his home because apparently he took a 77p bowl of pasta. What on earth?
I mean, we're laughing here, but it was anything but funny for the young man concerned, Adam, who gave us his story exclusively on Talk. And now Adam worked for a couple of years inside a migrant hotel, and he actually quite enjoyed the job. He's a very measured young man. He's not what Keir Starmer would like to dismiss as some far-right thug, not a bit of it. But over the time that he was working inside that migrant hotel, he became increasingly disillusioned and frankly quite shocked by some of what he saw. He liked some of the clients there, or service users as they were known, but I'm afraid many of the others were not very grateful for the generosity of the British taxpayer. They would trash their rooms, they would hold hunger strikes because they didn't think the food was good enough. This was catering that I think most people would be pretty happy with, especially given that it was free. And indeed, he tells a story of how one of the other workers in the hotel, single mum, struggling to put food on the table, asked for permission to take the leftovers from that catering home in a Tupperware box, but apparently it wasn't good enough for many of the migrants who staged not one but two sit-down protests. They wouldn't eat the food because it wasn't up to their standards. And they were fighting quite a lot of the time. He's shared with me CCTV footage of that, and I think Talk will be showing that at a future date. And when he left the migrant hotel, he decided that he needed to expose some of this, because after all, the government goes out of its way, really does go out of its way to stop us, the taxpayer, from seeing inside those hotels. We know that the asylum seekers are getting a pretty good deal, but we don't really get to see how they behave. And he thought it was high time that people did see this. So he decided to conduct his own little expose, acting as a citizen journalist, and did some undercover recording, actually not so much in his old place of work, because that had closed down, but he slipped into 2 or 3 other migrant hotels, something that he says was easy for him because, as he puts it, he's brown. He is a person of mixed heritage, and he was able just to sort of saunter in, which I think it's fair to say, Alex, you and I perhaps wouldn't be able to do. And after slipping into these hotels, he recorded some undercover footage, and he sat down and enjoyed some pasta with some of the guests at one of these hotels. And next thing he knows, there are 10 riot police at his door, banging on the door, barging in, terrifying his poor elderly mother who's disabled, and demanding to take his mobile phone, to take his electronic devices, turning the house upside down and arresting him. Now, what were they arresting him for? Well, apparently burglary. He is accused of burgling a bowl of pasta and perhaps other food from the migrant hotels where he briefly went in to expose what goes on. Now, the value of that pasta that he thinks he's being accused of stealing, he has worked out, because he saw a lot of the catering kind of costs and the way it all works. He's worked out the value of that bowl of pasta is an enormous 77 pence. So how is it that was worth the time of even one policeman, never mind 10 officers in riot gear? What an absolute joke.
I mean, it's scary. It is dystopian. Now, you've done a brilliant sit-down interview of him. We have pulled together some clips from that. Let's have a little watch.
I see 10 police officers on my drive in 10 10 police
Are you
officers.
sure? 10?
The CCTV doesn't lie. 10 police officers in full riot gear. So I ran downstairs, opened the door. I was like, is everything okay? They barged through. He says, are you Adam? And I said, yes. And they said, you're under arrest for burglary. I said, burglary? I said, never burgled anything in my life. And the accusation was taking some chicken pasta and not paying for it.
Was there a possibility to pay for it?
So there's no possibility to pay, no tills, nobody asking for money. I've ran the numbers through AI of how much it would cost with serving it for 300 people, and they said it would be about 77p.
I mean, let's call it what it is, Isabel, that this isn't about the pasta. This is using armed riot police like that and storming his home is deliberate state intimidation.
That is exactly what it is, and it really beggars belief that the state, the machinery of the state, is being used in this way. And you have to ask, what is it that the government is afraid of? Now, this will have been that police force's individual, in my view, absolutely extraordinary misjudgment. But unfortunately, we're seeing instances like this across the country, and that can only come from on high. Pressure on the machinery of the state, on the legal powers that be, on our criminal justice system, to shut down anything to do with the asylum seeker debate. They do not want citizen journalists, or indeed sometimes professional, well-known journalists. I'm thinking of Alison Pearson of The Telegraph here. They do not want people exposing uncomfortable truths or saying things that are a little bit awkward. And, you know, I wonder whether they thought that this young man was some kind of soft target, because he's not well known. He doesn't have a newspaper behind him. He doesn't have a radio station behind him. He's just a young man who got really disillusioned with the abuse of taxpayers' money and the appalling behaviour of some of the asylum seekers who are in this country. They basically broke into Britain and were living completely free at the expense of the British taxpayer. And his crime was to try to shed some light on that. And I don't think any of our listeners, our viewers, would think that that was worthy of even one police officer. You know, he might have perhaps expected a visit from a community officer saying, you know what, maybe this isn't the way to go about it. You know, there are reasons why perhaps a different approach would be better. And I'm sure he's so law-abiding. You know, he told me that he's never so much as, I don't think, had any penalty points on his driving licence. I'm sure that if he just had a visit from a community officer who asked what he was trying to achieve, and had a nice chat, that would have been the end of it. So what on earth are our authorities doing, using limited resources in this fashion? I mean, I think we all know shoplifting is absolutely rife, and I've never seen an armed response, you know, a riot police response to someone stealing a can of beans. Have you?
No, well, it is state intimidation, and it's a very, very dark day when we look at Britain. We realise that that is where we have got to, but we knew it anyway a long time ago. Isabel, fantastic journalism as ever, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else that comes out of that interview as this station exclusively continues to play your brilliant content. Isabel Oakeshott, Talk's international editor. Thank you ever so much. Now, coming up after the break, we're going to be talking to a great friend of this channel, Benedict Spence, about a couple of subjects. One is the death of Dick Cheney, perhaps one of the most influential vice presidents in US history. But also I wanted to get Benedict on to talk about how America might be becoming a little bit more interventionist when it comes to the genocide of Christians in Africa. That's after this.
Big news coming.
Previous governments have not adequately faced up to these challenges.
Seriously, love, can you get to the point?
Too often, political convenience has been prioritised over economic imperative. The decision to pursue a policy of austerity after the financial crisis dealt a hammer blow.
Hold her a minute. David Wooding, 10-second reaction. How long is it going to be before this woman who doesn't know how to add up just says, I'm going to raise your taxes?
Well, she's sort of breaking it to us gently.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the programme. Now, we had some breaking news quite recently, which is that former US Vice President Dick Cheney has passed away at the age of 84. Joining us now is the brilliant commentator Benedict Spence, a friend of this channel, to walk us through all matters geopolitical. So let us start, Benedict, with Dick Cheney. Now, some might say that he was one of the most influential vice presidents that America has ever had, with George Bush essentially delegating responsibility for foreign affairs and geopolitics quite substantially to Mr. Cheney. And this, of course, was during a period of time that America was extremely interventionist, particularly in the Middle East.
That's certainly true, and not just under George W. Bush, but also under his father, George H.W. Bush. I mean, this is a man who is, many would say he was the architect, actually, of the invasions, if not of Afghanistan, then certainly of Iraq and the plan afterwards. So influential, consequential, not necessarily always right, I think we could possibly say, given the outcome of that, but certainly at the forefront of a period of, we might not call it American expansionism, but certainly, as we all know, that sort of period of Republican-driven interventionism that really did begin to define the early noughties and the war on terror, America's sort of much more muscular response to threats abroad, certainly in the aftermath of 9/11. And I think that there's no question that an awful lot of people actually within the Republican Party both ascribe and also blame Mr. Cheney with America's involvements in a number of its so-called forever wars around the world, or at the very least believe that he was somebody who played a very key role in fomenting that state of affairs. Undoubtedly, as you say, probably the most consequential vice president who never at least came to become president. For that, I think you have to step back and look at an incredibly influential life, and possibly at somebody who has laid the groundwork for much of the withdrawal of the Republican Party, the desire to not be involved in the world so much, but possibly also what we are maybe about to get on to talking about now, which is the Trump administration's newfound love of involving itself in the affairs of the rest of the world.
Yeah, I mean, it is quite remarkable. Like you said, the Republican Party largely withdrawing, America first attitude, don't want to waste money on issues such as Ukraine when it's so far away. But Donald Trump is really taking decisive action when it comes to what is going on in Nigeria. Now, this has been going on for an awfully long time at the hands of Boko Haram in the very north, but now in the middle belt of Nigeria, where the Fulani tribe, which is Muslim majority, meet the Christians in the middle. We're seeing massacres, one of which happened at a place called Yeliwata in early June. 100 people died, slashed, stabbed, burnt inside of their houses. They were hiding in the church, the school, in market stalls. And this has been going on for a long time. And actually not only in Nigeria, but many other countries in that part of Africa. And it's largely ignored by the legacy media because, well, you know, Christians are never victims, are they? But what is clear, we've seen this throughout history, that Christians are probably the most persecuted religion in many countries of the world, from the Middle East to now, that sort of hump of Western Africa, indeed in East Africa as well. And Donald Trump has said that he will go in guns a-blazing if the Nigerian government fails to protect Christians. He put on Truth Social, they're killing record numbers of Christians in Nigeria. They're killing them in very large numbers. We're not going to allow that to happen. To which Pete Hegseth, the Defence Secretary, responded, the Department of War is preparing for action. Either the Nigerian government protects Christians or we will kill the Islamic terrorists who are committing these horrible atrocities. Well, that sounds very much like America is prepared to put boots on the ground in Nigeria. Quite astonishing.
It is, and obviously the Nigerian government is not going to be particularly keen on that sort of thing. It doesn't want other countries meddling in its sovereignty. And I mean, partly, as you describe, there's been an uptick in violence towards Christians, not just in Nigeria, but across the region. And one can't sort of separate that from the withdrawal of French forces between 2022 and now from much of the Sahel and its role in combating Islamists everywhere from Chad to Burkina Faso to Senegal. But a lot of the governments of these countries themselves actually were the ones that said that they didn't want French intervention in there anymore. And of course, as we all know, what happened in the aftermath of French withdrawal? Well, you see the expansion of al-Qaeda-affiliated organizations, Boko Haram, but also the tendrils of the Wagner Group involved all across North Africa and the Sahel as well. And of course, it's important that you mention that it's not just West Africa, it's not just this part of the Sahel, it is also intrinsically linked to what's going on elsewhere across East Africa as well. And as you also say, there is this element of people simply not paying attention to it. In fact, we've had some media outlets, Al Jazeera for instance, come out and say explicitly there is no genocide of Christians going on. Absolutely none. Nothing to see here at all. And for the most part, Western media organizations do ignore this. I mean, you say it's because it's Christians. That's partly why it is. But it's also because it's Africans, if we're being completely honest here, which is the perception in the West still, even from a lot of these so-called progressive or moderate outlets, that when Africans kill Africans, well, that's just what they do. And it's not really newsworthy. And it is disgraceful because it is happening in the tens, if not hundreds of thousands now. And even to the point where we can't ignore it in Sudan, the sheer scale of what's been going on in Sudan can't be ignored. But there's something that needs to be said, and this is why it is important, because there will be plenty of people, even within that sort of MAGA wing of the Republican Party, saying, why is this anything to do with us? Take the Christianity aspect out of the equation. Take the persecution out of the equation. What is this going to lead to? It's going to lead to another mass migration crisis. Where are these people going to go? They're going to go to Europe. They're going to go to the part of the world that they think is closest to them, that is ostensibly at least safe for Christian people to go to. So this is something we should be paying special attention to. But as you say, it all sort of ties into this newfound desire of the Trump administration, who understands that you can't simply step back from the world. We've seen this in Venezuela as well. You know, the peace-loving, peace deal-making Donald Trump more than happy to sort of shake his saber at Venezuela. But of course, all of this also goes back and ties in very neatly to Dick Cheney, because of course, the last time the United States properly put boots on the ground anywhere in Africa was Somalia. And that didn't particularly work out very well for the US government.
Yeah, I mean, it is everything you say is entirely true, that there is this sort of concept that when something happens in Africa, well, it's just what Africans do. When normally when things like this happen in Africa, it is because other powers are using it as a theatre of war. That is exactly what's going on in Sudan. There's a fight for resources there, deliberate destabilisation of that country in order that, as you said, the Wagner mercenaries, because they're in there, along with the UAE, who all want access to rare earth minerals and particularly the oil fields, and they don't care how many people end up dying as a result of their nefarious activities, because they believe human life over in Africa is cheap. And as somebody who has lived in both Ghana and in Kenya and worked extensively across the continent of Africa, I regard our cousins over in Africa as the linchpin of Anglicanism. There's very few places on earth where Christianity is so robust and beautiful as you find in Africa. But it'd be interesting to see how this one now plays out, because it's such a big and important country, Nigeria. A pretty new president over there, Bola Tinubu, himself a northerner who is a Muslim origin, but married to a Christian pastor. This is going to be a big wake-up call, I think, for the continent as a whole.
It is, and it's a very delicate situation. Nigeria is actually one of the only countries in the world, large countries in the world, that still has above replacement fertility rates, as you alluded to, huge natural resources, but still, of course, very ethnically based, very tribally based, very geographically based. Its collapse, if it were to happen, either because of an Islamist insurgency or because of external interference, would be catastrophic. And I go back to what I was saying about the possibility for the mass movement of people and where they would end up going. Its stability is of the utmost importance, but the question that the Trump administration has to weigh up is stability at the expense of isolated Christian communities being savaged by roaming gangs of Islamists? Is that an acceptable price to pay? And I think actually for an awful lot of, as you say, Christians in the United States, they are are beginning to get a lot more muscular in terms of their worldview. They may not think America should be in the business of empire building, but they do also think that the persecution of Christians around the world has gone on for too long. How do they marry that? We wait and see. But I don't think you're going to see a full-scale invasion or intervention in Nigeria like we saw in Iraq or Somalia, but I do think there'll be a lot of arm twisting on the Nigerian authorities from the Trump administration.
Well, I imagine the Nigerian authorities might actually ask for some sort of aid and assistance in combating Islamism. Look, as a Christian, I always think it's disgusting that this country, when it came to what was going on in the Middle East, said to people from Afghanistan and Syria, come one, come all, but not to the Yazidi Christians. Whose side are we on? Whose side are we on? I think Christendom needs to get together. Right, before I let you go, Benedict, what is your reaction, talking about legacy media and what the stories that they're interested in and glorifying and the narrative they like to say, what is your reaction to the very deliberate, deceitful doctoring of Trump's speech back ahead of the so-called Capitol Hill riots?
Oh, I'm always, whenever there's something to do with the BBC, I'm wondering, where was BBC Verify in all of this?
Yeah.
But, don't they exist to find the disinformation? Are we, in fact, going to get a report from BBC Verify? Or will they, in fact, turn around and later and say, this didn't actually happen, but you know who did do this? Oh, it's those anonymous online right-wing trolls. That's always who they seem to blame, ultimately. Honestly, it's just another kick in the shins for the corporation, because we don't know if this is sort of institutional or if it is bad actors. It's possible that it's a bit of both, but ultimately, it's such a large organisation, the BBC, and it sort of consumes so much in terms of raw resources that it's very difficult, even if you were at the top and objectivity was your raison d'etre, and that was all you were trying to do. I suspect it's far too broad an organisation for one person or even a group of people to keep a proper handle on. And this is a serious problem because, do you know what? It massively damages not just the brand, it damages actually the perception of Britain. One of the few things about the BBC once upon a time was that people abroad could trust it to give a largely objective opinion. Increasingly, that's being eroded. And at a time when actually people in, say, countries like Nigeria can't get unbiased news sources, that was one of the things we used to pride ourselves on, the BBC being able to give people objective news. I don't think that reputation exists anymore.
No, it's gone. Benedict, thank you ever so much. Always fantastic catching up with the fantastic and brilliant, as always, erudite Benedict Spence. Look, I'm someone who actually used to work in investigations at the BBC. True story. I worked for a programme called Week In, Week Out at BBC Wales, which was their equivalent of a panorama. And I can tell you this, I know how it works. The editor of that programme would have looked at every single clip. The director would have known exactly how things were being spliced together. And their heads need to roll. That's all I'm saying. There has to be personal accountability for this. OK, we're going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere, because joining us after the break is Layla Cunningham, a big star on the rise for Reform UK. She's going to be giving us her interpretation of the news just after this.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On the app. On your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, hello there and welcome back to the show. Alex Phillips here with you until 1 o'clock. Thank you for keeping me company for the last 2 hours, if indeed you have. Your certificates will be in the post shortly. If you've only just joined me, where have you been? What better things have you got to do with your Tuesday morning? Although it is now afternoon. But welcome aboard if you are only just tuning in. You've missed out on some really good, gnarly, proper truth bombing. But we're going to continue within that spirit as we go forwards. And I'm pleased to say that we are joined by the fantastic Layla Cunningham, Reform UK councillor, co-leader of Reform's Law and Order campaign. Who better to ask about law and order, particularly when it comes to safety on our trains? That horrific multiple stabbing incidents on the train to Cambridgeshire on Saturday night has provoked people in looking into how many assaults are taking place on our rail network, and it is astonishing that I'm going to tell you now that back in 2014-2015, a mere decade ago, there were 3,211 reported numbers of assaults, according to a report by the Office of Rail and Road. Well, that has soared to over 10,000 in the past year, which amounts to 28 assaults every single day on our rail network, 11 of those being sexual assaults every single day. I'd say that's probably the tip of the iceberg. I wonder how many cases simply go unreported. Layla, what is going on?
Well, and you say that, but BCP's, which is British Transport Police's detection rate, is also collapsing. Only about 12% of crimes are solved. And yeah, 30% of women are sexually harassed. I mean, I've had it, I've prosecuted it. And yet the Transport Minister has the audacity to say it's one of the safest in the world. Safety isn't just about statistics, it's about how people feel when they step on that train. And right now, Alex, millions don't feel safe. And the government's response is, what did you say? She's going to have another review, another committee. We need deterrence. We need police.
Is it as simple as saying that, you know, we now live in an age where we've got to have potential knife archers, got to have more stop and search, got to have trained guards on train stations, transport police and the like? Or do we need to actually go into what is the cause of all of this? Because, you know, I was having a good old rant yesterday. I've just moved out to the Cotswolds because I was fed up with living in London and feeling unsafe on a daily basis. I was fed up with having the hair stand up on the back of my neck if I had to get a tube late home, if I was having to walk the gauntlet of Earl's Court Road, where I used to live, where all of a sudden in the space of 4 years, there were suddenly sort of men leering at me, making me feel uncomfortable, following me with their eyes or even with their feet. I think a lot of that's got to do with the amount of cheap hotels in the area, which I think have been given over to our intruders from other countries. So I move out to the Cotswolds and suddenly I'm able to breathe again. I suddenly find I don't have to think twice if I get my phone out in public. I can walk around the streets and not have to look in shop windows to see if anybody's walking behind me. That's brilliant. This is normal life again. But of course I commute into work every day on the train, and suddenly I find when my train pulls into certain stations and certain people get on, I think, here we go. I've got that familiar knot of anxiety again, because we basically are living under terrorism. But what is at the heart of all of this? That's what I'm trying to understand here. Why have we suddenly become a society very rapidly where there are multiple stabbings, multiple sexual assaults, where people feel like we're just absolutely falling apart when it comes to law and order? Because it's very easy to turn around and go, yes, there's an influx of foreign men who have brought unwelcome cultures from other countries, and that is without doubt can be evidence, particularly looking at crime statistics. But then you look at this, and this is a British man who has done this. What is going on at large that is behind this degradation of culture in this country?
Well, I do think it's multifaceted. You know, you're right that we do have the highest number of asylum seekers or illegal migrants housed in hotels in the whole country in London. For instance, the stabbing in Uxbridge, they have the highest number. And I think that does take into account, if you look at sexual assaults numbers, the way they've gone up, they have gone up by the 4 or 5 top countries of those that arrive on boats. That's not a coincidence. That's the truth. And on another level, people don't feel safe because police visibility has vanished. Most women don't want scanners. We want uniforms on platforms. We want working CCTV, more officers on the ground. And I'd like to see lifetime bans for offenders on public transport, bans from areas where they commit their offences. But we don't have that. Mandatory sentencing for knife and sexual offences on the train. But we don't have that right now. So the thing is, when there's no accountability for crime, crime runs rampant.
Do you think as well, though, that we need to sort of culturally tread where few people dare to go, which is, and I'm happy to say this, which is I think we have a huge problem with the glorification of knife culture. I think we have a huge problem with people listening to drill music and smoking psychosis-inducing drugs and then going out, their heads a scramble and committing violent crimes. I think it is the same thing with the flagrant misogyny in that same culture. We were talking earlier today about the clampdown on strangulation in pornographic videos. I mean, thank goodness someone's taking action on that front. But do we not need to culturally address violence that is being spoon-fed to subsets of our society that currently we don't comment on at all because we might be deemed racist should we do so?
I mean, there is a serious issue with drill music and the kind of ideals it promotes. I used to listen to hip hop growing up, and it wasn't quite the same.
Right.
It is really aggressive now. I mean, some of them are just literally got 3 words in them, and it's drugs, kill, and I don't know what else, some misogynistic term. You're right. But I do think that's going to be harder to. Can't really censor it. You can't censor music, and you shouldn't. But we have the youth in this country who listen to drill music and are heavily influenced, are being let down by a justice system because we have a justice system that doesn't really punish. The youth get away with almost anything up to murder because they are under 18, and that makes them a target for organised crime, and that makes them a target. And when you politicise stop and search like Theresa May did and Sadiq Khan did, you allow them to just walk around with knives. And I'm sure most mothers who've been a victim, whose children have been a victim of knife crime, would like that person to be stop and searched before they commit the crime. But sadly, we have weak leadership.
I want to ask you about self-defence, because my other argument was I'm a 5'3" woman sitting on a train or walking through the street by myself. If someone decided to come wielding a knife at me, or if someone tries to snatch my phone, if someone tries to drag me into the bush or grab my behind or whatever, pick from a range of crimes that seem to be prolific and prevalent in this day and age, I've got absolutely nothing to defend myself with. I've got absolutely nothing that I can use that's going to be sufficient enough to make me feel safe. What would you say about something like the legalisation of pepper spray in this country?
I've heard people against it saying that they don't want it in the hands of criminals, but I find that a very weak argument because criminals can get their hands on anything anytime. They've got knives, they've got guns, they're not going to stop at pepper spray. I know it's legal in France, and I know it does help. I've had the unfortunate thing. I was sprayed with pepper spray once, and it's horrific, and it does stop you in your tracks. I would like to see actually the legalization of pepper spray. That might be controversial, but I think as a woman, I would feel much safer. As you say, we are the weaker sex physically most of the time, and I wouldn't mind having something that I feel protects me, because I sure as hell don't have the police around protecting me.
No, I totally agree. I think it's about time. It's high time these things need to be legalised. They are in many countries. I would feel safer if I knew. If I heard a commotion on a train of people shouting, run, run, that person's got a knife. If I knew I could reach into my handbag and have something that I can immediately use to stop someone in their tracks, it would prevent not just harm against me, but everybody else on that blimmin' train. I think it's utterly ridiculous. I'm not about to suggest that we sort of start legalising the carrying of guns and have a Second Amendment. I mean, thank goodness in this country we don't really have gun crime, and I don't wish to suddenly see that become the next weapon of choice. But you can't have a situation where people are tooling around with kitchen knives and I've got nothing and you've got nothing and your daughters have nothing. It is absolutely, we've got to a stage where this is a matter of life and death, frankly. Let's talk now about talking about matters of life and death, the UK economy. That thing seems to be circling the plug hole. Rachel Reeves blaming everything on the right wing, apparently Donald Trump, bit of Brexit, that's a problem. Oh, the Conservatives as well. Nothing to see here. I've not been a Chancellor for the past year. That 22 billion black hole didn't suddenly become 50 billion through anything I've done. She definitely seems to be fluffing us for some pretty bad news at the end of the month. What would you expect that bad news to be?
More taxes. That they have no respect for the person that wakes up and goes to work. And like you say, you know, gets on the train, pays for the train, and then pays. They have no respect for that, because for years we've paid people not to work while punishing those who do. And Nigel's right in his speech yesterday. That has to change. We need a welfare system that's a safety net, it's not a lifestyle. And I would like to see a government that stops rewarding dependency and targets really those that genuinely need help, because that's what we're about. But we need to also help the people that are keeping this country alive. You know, Alex, the political discussion is always, how do you tax the very rich more, and how do you get benefits for those who are the least wealthy? But they never talk about the middle that actually works and pays for most of it.
Yeah.
And they're completely ignored. And that was what Nigel's speech was about yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem to me that what really sticks in my craw and the rest of the population is there's a load of people sitting under slankets doing absolutely naff all. And if you suddenly took those privileges away, if all of a sudden they couldn't afford to watch Netflix and all the box sets they want for day in, day out, and were forced to go to work or else live in poverty, it's amazing how many people would suddenly find a work ethic. But Nigel's promised things before. He promised ahead of the local elections there's going to be a big doging of local authorities and any council that happened to fall under Reform's control, and perhaps Reform hit a bigger jackpot that they anticipated in taking over 10 councils nationally. But it seems to me Doge has rather died a death. We haven't heard much more about that initial wave of efficiency savings. In fact, a lot of the Reform-controlled councils are going to be forced to put up council tax. So where is that audit? What's going on? Zia Youssef's not running it anymore. Who's actually grabbing the nettle?
Well, I think Richard Tice has been put in charge of it. But in terms of tax saving, there has been actually across the 10 councils that you speak of, we've saved about 100 million. And that's 100 million that would have been paid for by the taxpayer. None of them have confirmed that they're going to increase council tax. And council tax will go up across the country, sadly, because we have a government that's not interested in cutting people's tax. So they have saved money, and that's only in 6 months. And they are looking every single day of ways to cut excessive spending. And that is so different to any other government that's been in charge, who has no interest in cutting spending, who is just interested in increasing spending, and with that, increasing taxes. You know, the famous saying, there is no such thing as public money, it's taxpayer money. So we are very, very focused on cutting excessive spending, very focused.
As a councillor, I want to ask you something. How much of this ends up being a tug of war between the politicians and the civil service, the apparatchiks? Because what we hear behind the scenes constantly when it comes to politics is, well, you know, whoever is Home Secretary, they want to do X, Y and Z, but the staff at the Home Office say, no, it can't be done. Are you facing similar problems in the day-to-day management and politics at council level?
Well, I'm not managing the council, because we're not in power.
No, I know that in Westminster, but in terms of as a councillor, can you give me an insight into that?
I'm a singular reform councillor, but I mean, I can tell you, you know, as a criminal prosecutor, there was a huge sustainability department, you know, getting paid double the amount I was, and I'm a senior Crown prosecutor. And I mean, Alex, we're lawyers with computers. We don't need a large sustainability department. So we're talking about cutting things like that really, for me, is an insult to those that get up and work to have to pay for it. We don't want to pay for ideology. We just want to pay for a public service that delivers. And right now we have the highest tax burden since World War II, and a public service that everybody feels is not only not delivering, it's failing.
I couldn't agree more. I like that. We don't want to pay for ideology. I hope you don't mind if I nick that one in future, Layla. Thank you ever so much, Layla Cunningham, Reform UK councillor, co-leader of Reform's Law and Order campaign, a rising star indeed in that party, and I think in politics as a whole. OK, we're going to take a short break now. After the break, we're going to have a Labour voice on in the form of Lord Clive Soley to mop up Rachel Reeves' contextualising speech ahead of what could be a doom-laden budget at the end of the month. That's after this.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now. Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back to the show. Well, one thing that's probably not going to be welcome for many people across the United Kingdom will be the budget when Rachel Reeves reveals it at the end of this month. She was certainly paving the way to what might be pretty bad news for most of us, saying we've all got to shoulder some of the burden. Well, when we say all of us, I think we mean all of us who are paying our taxes. Could that mean that we are set to start having to pay more? Let's speak now to Lord Clive Soley, who is a Labour peer. Clive, welcome to the programme. It seemed to me that Rachel Reeves, when she was quizzed afterwards, being asked questions by journalists about whether this would mean putting up income tax, she didn't answer it, which normally in politics means I don't want to give you the answer because the general public won't like the sound of it. Do you think I'm onto something?
I think it also means, I mean, there's an element of truth in what you said, but it's also true that you're not going to start talking about a budget when you haven't made the decisions yet. So that's sensible. What she was doing this morning is two things, and they're both very important. The first one was sending a clear message to the markets that the borrowing rules aren't going to change, because that's what's brought stability to the British economy in the last year or so. So that was an important message, and the markets and the various business organisations will welcome that. The second one, which you're indicating, is there is likely to be increased taxes, although I think you have to be a bit careful of this because you might find it's about major changes in taxes. One of the most interesting things being floated at the moment is a small cut in the national insurance rate and an increase in standard rate tax, because that would not hit people on lower incomes. So, you know, there are arguments around it which are much more complex, but I'd be surprised if there isn't more tax. Because the other thing I'd say that you need to focus on too, I was a bit concerned when you gave your little list of things of what was wrong with the British economy. There's two big ones you didn't mention. One is obviously Ukraine. One of the last speeches I made in the House of Lords in November 2017 pointed out that we needed to increase our defence expenditure to about 3% if we were to avoid another major war in Europe. And I don't always agree with Donald Trump, but he's absolutely right in saying that the United States should not be bearing the defence burden which ought to be carried by Europe. But if you want to avoid a major war in Europe, and there is a danger of that, there's a touch of the 1930s about our present situation, then we are in Europe going to have to increase defence spending. The other big one, which is you can't do anything about really, is that in the last 20 odd years, China and Asia have become major competitors economically, and because they are behind the curve in terms of some of the services that you get in the West, it's obviously going to be easier for them to outperform the West.
Yeah, I mean, you said those 2 points. It's interesting, actually, with Ukraine. Some people might see it as an advantage if we start increasing defence spending, because it directly invests things like the weapons industry, of which the UK actually has quite a thriving sector in terms of the military-industrial complex.
Yeah, so let's do it, but you have to pay for it in the first instance. It only benefits for you when you get those orders coming through. But it is happening.
In terms of China's competitiveness, us, they have a major advantage that they don't seem to give two hoots about climate change and are building coal-fired power stations while Ed Miliband is running over to Beijing on a regular basis to buy green technology. I mean, surely we're playing into the hands of that unfair advantage.
That's a bit too simplistic, because China actually has made remarkable progress in cutting its emissions, but coal is still a problem there. Also, it is true that the Chinese have not made the advances that have been made in the West over the last 100, almost 200 years, actually. And that means we in the West, not just Britain, this is why we have this problem in France, Germany, United States, the economies are struggling because they can't keep up with that East Asian explosion of economic efficiency and competence. That's a major long-term problem. I mean, I'm not saying that there's an easy answer to it. There's not. All I'm saying is don't deduct the difficult issues. They are there.
I understand the nuance of all of this, but I sometimes wonder if the Labour government understands the nuance of all of this, because we know we're facing economic hardship. We know we're struggling to compete in a globalised world with workforces that cost far less than our own and energy bills that cost far less than our own. So why are we the one country in the developed world who are going hell for leather for net zero, which is going to cost, by the end of the Labour Party's term, £60 billion? When you look at things like the public sector pay rises, that's added an extra £10 billion onto the public purse. Surely these are things, if you were going to be prudent and pragmatic about our economic situation, were simply not affordable right now.
Well, you're not actually correct in saying we are the only government that's doing it this way. In fact, if you look around the Western world, some have made remarkable progress, not just the West, incidentally. Some developing countries have done far more than we've done. And then if you look individual states, in the United States, even where Trump is bearing down on it, you find that places like California are doing far better than we are, and many others. Why? Because companies and others recognize that climate change is a serious problem and we've got to deal with it. Now, that's this second part of Rachel Reeves' message that needs to be addressed, really. You know, you're quite right. Taxes will probably, not definitely, but probably go up in some form. She might be able to adjust things in other ways as well. And that is going to happen throughout the Western world. Look at those problems in France at the moment, and you recognise the British economy is in a better place than the French economy. So you sort of saying, oh, it's terrible in Britain. I have to say, I'm proud of what Britain
Well, look,
is.
I'm well aware.
Well, I'm not sure that you are. Don't come over that you're proud of Britain. It comes over that you're sort of trying to rubbish it all the time.
Well, no, what I am trying to rubbish is some of the decisions taken by this government that I am paying for, that I am paying through the nose for, when I don't really cost the state anything. And I'll mention two things, shall I, that Rachel Reeves failed to mention this morning, which most of my listeners realise are a huge blight on the country's record of governance and don't feel particularly fair.
What's a blight?
One of them is migration, and the number of people who are foreign-born subsisting off benefits and not working and not contributing to our economy, the cost of illegal immigration into this country, that wasn't mentioned by her at all. And the second one is the huge welfare bill, which of course she did mention last time round. One of the reasons the IMF didn't rubbish our economy is because in theory the welfare bill was going to be in train through Parliament, which of course the Labour backbenchers blocked. She said again that that bill has to come down, but will it be executed? Will your party get behind that?
I think you've got a strong case when you talk about the benefits issue. The Labour government is struggling with that. On the immigration thing, you need to think this through. 3 years ago, before the Labour government in power, 1 million people came to Britain under the immigration rules of the last government. It is actually dramatically dropping. And what they've got to do, because this will, make people feel much better if you can deal with the boats problem. The boats problem is not a quick fix, and people have learned that now. Reform is recognising it's not a quick fix. You've got to sort it out in a number of ways, and it is very, very important that it is sorted out.
Well, let's hope it does get sorted out on both of those issues, because the general public are certainly, I think, on the doorstep saying that they are of grave concern. Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining me, Lord Soley. Always great to have a Labour voice on, and I always really respect those who come into the lion's den, so to speak, when it comes to batting for the party. And very honest and candid remarks there that we do need to sort out welfare, and we do need to sort out the small boats. Well, chop then. We've been saying this for a long time, haven't we? And I agree with him as well. The Boris wave of migration. Let us not reduce the responsibility on the Labour Party's predecessors on that front, because they did preside over a ridiculously, exorbitantly, dangerously high wave of migration into this country, and we mustn't forget that. OK, we're going to take a short break now, but when we come back, we're joined by the brilliant Greg Swenson, chairman of Republicans Overseas, to talk through that doctored Trump speech by BBC Panorama, the death of Vice President Dick Cheney today, and there are elections going on right now in America. You may not have noticed, or perhaps you have, particularly one big contest: who will be the next mayor of New York? Will it be the radical leftist Mamdani? If so, what will that mean? That's coming up after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Have you ever met a man who smells as good or is as tall as Greg Swenson? Alex thinks to herself. No, I don't think I have, actually. Delighted to say he joins us now. Hello there, Greg. I thought I'd just switch up my introduction to you, but you are very tall and very nice smelling, can I just say?
Thank you. You're very kind.
I know I am. Now, people who aren't very kind, the BBC doctoring that speech, you must have seen it, the Trump speech. I mean, this isn't just a case of editorialising a little bit, having someone on who gives a negative opinion, not balancing out a panel. This is deliberate, willful deception. This is fraud.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. But unfortunately, Alex, it really didn't come as a surprise. You know, I don't think anybody, at least, you know, from in the conservative circles, was really surprised that the BBC would do that. And, you know, we've always known about the bias, right? Okay, there's liberal bias in mainstream media. Okay, that's something that we're all used to. But I think, you know, outright deception is amazing. And you know, I don't think they'll change anytime soon, but I hope this story doesn't go away. I think that, you know, if anything, the Dick Cheney news today has somewhat buried it. So I'm really glad you brought it up.
Yeah, do you think that Donald might take some action over this? Because at the end of the day, yes, you know, the BBC might not be a massive broadcaster over in America, but it has international prominence. It is still probably the leading broadcast network in the Anglosphere.
Yes, Alex, and I think he will sue. He sued CBS for the same thing. They doctored an interview from Kamala Harris during the campaign that, you know, was clearly designed to favor Kamala in the election. He sued them. He won $15 million. The money doesn't really matter. It's just the principle of it. But I think what's important to remember about, you know, BBC is, as you pointed out, they do have influence globally. And so much of the perception of President Trump is driven by the BBC headlines. And so even if the story, if there's a lot more to the story, or if President Trump said something good or did something good, they'll lead with a negative headline, and it affects other media institutions as well.
I think actually it could be a very interesting test case if Donald Trump decides to sue the BBC, and I think it really should happen. I do, however, worry that it'll be the licence fee payer, aka the majority of the UK taxpayers, who have to pick up the bill, and it won't land upon the individuals who should be accountable for this. But what is interesting, actually, is I think that there's been a huge suppression of democracy. There's been, I would say, sort of electoral interference by broadcasters such as the BBC for a number of years in things like the nomenclature they use to describe right-wing parties, in the way that they frame and portray certain political debates. So I think it'd be a very interesting test case indeed. Let's talk now about the mayoral race over in New York. I think a lot of people might be aware of that in particular. There are, of course, other gubernatorial contests happening across America. They're not quite midterms, which will, after that, we'll see quite how strong a grip the Republicans have on the country. But the contest happening in New York especially is fascinating. And it seems to me an extremely far left mayor in the form of Zohan Mamdani could be about to take over. Tell us more about him and how dangerous he could be.
Yeah, it's amazing, Alex. This was one of those, you know, perfect storm elections in the Democratic primary, which is normally the real election in a city like New York and my hometown of Chicago. You know, whoever wins the Democratic primary wins the election. This time around, he sort of, in many ways, snuck in, did some really great campaigning, had a big social media presence, got out the vote for young voters, you know, the same idiots that you see protesting on college campuses, specifically in New York, like at Columbia and Fordham. Those are the people that voted in the primaries. And, you know, shame on the rest of the citizens who didn't bother voting. But I do think that this is one of those moments where, you know, the electoral system really favored a newcomer. He's young. He's 33 years old. He has no experience. He is a communist. He claims to be a socialist, but he is a communist. And he's very much pro-Hamas. And so he appeals to this really thin sliver of the electorate. But unfortunately for New Yorkers, it's that sliver of the electorate that's outvoting, or at least voted in the primary. So we could be surprised today. I know they were trying to register as many Orthodox Jews as possible, which is a good thing because he's very anti-Semitic. And so in a city with a significant Jewish population, I can't remember the exact detail, but it's significant. I mean, it's 30%. This should be a real challenge for Mamdani, but unfortunately, everybody was asleep at the wheel for the primary.
Yeah, I mean, let's have a look at how this shock result, well, result of him being the candidate, may have come to pass. There was an item done by our cousin station over in America, Fox, which is looking at some of the big demographic changes in New York. Let's take a peek.
Population, one borough, America. Population, 2.4 million people. Foreign born in Queens, 48%. Languages spoken, 160. Do you get the idea here? I mean, this is just a tapestry of culture and ethnicity and religion and politics. And man, it all comes together come Tuesday night.
I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? There is this sense now that a bit like London, New York is its own little enclave. It isn't America as a whole, and perhaps Mandani represents that. You spoke about him sort of suggesting he has things like communist tendencies and Hamas sympathies. Can you flesh that out a little bit more for us, Greg?
Yeah, I mean, and he brags about it. It's not like, this is something that, someone that the media had to find some texts from 5 years ago. I mean, he is very much, pro-Hamas. He at no point did he condemn Hamas or suggest that they should lay down their arms during the peace arrangement last month. And then he brags about being a democratic socialist. That's his words. But we know he's a communist. He's not. He is against private property. He wants to have free everything, free transportation. He wants government-owned grocery stores. And the Fox News brought up a good point. I mean, Queens, yes, is a tapestry, but it always has been. It was when it was my ancestors, the Irish immigrants. It was plenty of Italian immigrants. The difference is they were more prone to integrate. Now, that's not suggesting that many immigrants in Queens are not integrating. I think the Hispanics are fantastic in Queens in terms of their integration into society. But I think many of the immigrants, especially the illegal migrants, are not integrating. And then, of course, you've had the problem with illegal migrant crime that started in Queens with the man who killed Laken Riley, the nursing student in Georgia. He was arrested in Queens and released, of course, because as soon as they found out he was an illegal migrant, they let him go and then sent him off with a bus ticket down to Georgia. So, look, there's a lot going on in New York right now. It's a very difficult place. The slide started with the election of Bill de Blasio, about 10 or 12 years ago. The city was great under Giuliani and Mike Bloomberg, and it's been on this slide. They've lost population. The taxpayers are leaving. COVID surely didn't help. You've had a mass exodus of New Yorkers, especially tax-paying New Yorkers, to states with lower income tax or just states that are better managed. And so they're going through a real rough patch right now, and Mandami is not the answer. This could set back the city a generation.
Yeah, we've all seen how this one plays out in London, I'm afraid.
Very similar.
Although I think Mandami's probably worse, actually. I saw a video the other day online about sort of it was a Muslim imam who was doing some sort of big iftar or something in the middle of New York, and he was shouting out on a megaphone how everyone had to be converted to Islam across New York. And I thought, hey, great, can't wait for that. Before I let you go, let's talk about the passing of Vice President Dick Cheney, who died of complications of pneumonia and cardiovascular disease at the age of 84. Now, why was he such a notable figure in US politics, Greg? How will he be remembered?
Well, unfortunately for him and the family, he'll be remembered for his 2 terms as vice president with George W. Bush and the disaster in Iraq and to a certain degree, generally speaking, on the war on terror, which is unfortunate because he had a great career before that. He was a prominent figure in Washington, very much part of the Reagan Revolution. He was in the George H.W. Bush administration. He was both chief of staff as well as Secretary of Defense. This is long before he joined George W. Bush in 2001. So, look, he made a lot of mistakes, and I think I'm sure that's going to be his legacy. But he did have a great and long career. He was part of that peace through strength generation, beginning with Reagan, and it worked, and it ended the Cold War. And it's a shame that he stuck around for too long and really kind of ruined his legacy with the Iraq and Afghanistan debacles. And also, he went full Trump derangement syndrome. I think many people will remember him for his daughter, Liz, who succeeded him a generation later as a congressperson from Wyoming and went full TDS. So, it's a shame, but that's just part of being in big boy politics.
Greg, it's always great catching up with you. Let's have a drink soon, especially as Greg always gets the rounds in. Right, let's take a short break now, talking about not overstaying one's welcome. I'm only on air until 1 o'clock, but this last segment is your opportunity to chat to me in person. So 0344499 is, 0344499 1000 is a number to dial if you'd like to have a chinwag with your very own Alex. I'm going to be reading some of your messages too after this.
Big news coming this December. Our Talk TV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the Talk TV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now. Big news coming this December. Our Talk TV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the Talk TV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, you gorgeous things. Shall we have a chat with some of you? Let's do just that. This is Patrick in Kent. Hello, Patrick.
Good afternoon, Alex.
Hello, good afternoon. Now, what is on your mind? What nuggets of wisdom or two bits do you want to share with us?
It's regarding the BBC and their illegal tampering of the Donald Trump speech. Now, the obvious thing is that they would get fined, but the trouble is that the money they pay for the fine is paid by the licence payer.
Right.
I would suggest that they've actually withheld their money for a period of time so they don't get any finances through.
I mean, actually, it should work like that, shouldn't it? Whatever fine is levelled against them, should there be a fine levelled against them, should immediately just be subtracted from the budget. And there should be cuts, real-time cuts, the BBC. And I would begin by cutting the jobs of those people involved in what was flagrant fraud, quite frankly. So there's lots of F's there. Struggled to get that one out. But what annoys me is it seems to me in the private sector, if you do something wrong, you lose your job. In the public sector, these people just get shuffled off to another department to live again. And like you said, it's us who have to contribute, who end up carrying the buck.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've worked in companies where someone's done something wrong and instead of sacking them, they just get promoted.
Yeah.
And then they cause trouble somewhere else. But the BBC, over many years, I think, have maybe not doctored things, but they've certainly been swayed one way. And I think that's more noticeable on programmes like Question Time and Newsnight, where, you know, there might be 2 or 3 party members against one single person on their own. And, you know, to me, it's not a balanced concepts anymore.
No, I'd love to see more people working at the BBC from the working classes who actually get politics, who actually understand where most of the population is at and begin to sort of infiltrate the ranks of power, which would start to shift the editorial line. Patrick, thank you ever so much for your call. Let's speak now to John, who's in Newcastle. Hello, John.
Hello. My point is just what's been said by your last speaker there, Donald Trump. Before the election, he was said to have told people to get even, you know, rouse people up and even use violence. Well, we know for a pure fact now that that was not the case. And the BBC are to blame. And I think it was, I don't watch the BBC, I think it was Panorama, but I don't watch the BBC, but I'm actually made, we have to pay the licence whether we watch BBC or not, which I think is an absolute disgrace. Do you walk into a shop and buy something that you don't like? Nobody does. If you know, many years ago, the 1976s, I remember some great programmes at the BBC. It couldn't be touched. It ain't off up, Mum, are you being served? Hello, hello, Dad saw me, porridge, the lot. They produce nothing like that nowadays. And all the producers, one of the highest television licenses in Europe. And to me, it's disgusting. If I was Mr. Trump and I got word of this, I would have a go at the BBC and you know, see what I could get out of them, because it's disgusting. Although there again, they're just taking it off the British taxpayer.
But it would serve as a very important test case, I think. You know, I was trying to have a Barney the other day and I put something up on X and for whatever reason it didn't seem to manifest on my feed. But I was really upset. I was annoyed and deeply concerned by something that Nick Robinson had done. Now, I've met Nick Robinson. I know Nick Robinson. I actually quite like him. I think he's a brilliant veteran journalist and who's one of the best storytellers, actually, in the industry. But on his political podcast, he had interviewed Zara Sultana and she had said that Nigel Farage was a fascist, that he was dangerous, and she compared him to Hitler. Now, my question here is, was that challenged enough? Why was that actually platformed and allowed to go out, especially given the fact that we know there have been death threats against him, given what we have seen happen in America when the left wing are able to propagate this idea that their political opponents pose an actual existential threat to the country? And I wanted to ask him this. If I went in an interview and said that Zara Sultana was a communist and a terrorist and dangerous and equated her to Stalin or Chairman Mao or Osama bin Laden, would I be able to do that? Would the other newspapers pick that up and celebrate it gleefully like The Guardian did? Or would Nick Robinson say, how dare you say that, Alex? You must qualify yourself. That's going too far. That is appalling. Do you not think that's inciting violence? I think there's far too much two-tierism in the BBC. I left the BBC as a VIP trainee back in the day because I remember going to an editorial. This is a true story. I was part of a training course where 10 of us were selected to be sort of recruited to be the next big things at the BBC. I left in under 6 months because I remember going to an editorial meeting at BBC Wales about immigration. It was the year anniversary of Poland and the other 6 EU accession states having full entry rights to the United Kingdom. And I made the point in an editorial meeting, I'd be interested to speak to a school teacher where the classroom now has kids with lots of different languages. No, you can't do that. I just remember thinking these people are absolutely brainwashed, and I was so appalled by it that I actually ended up running off into politics and working for Nigel Farage.
Yes, I would like to think that the British people, for once, over the decades, would wake up to find that the Conservatives, Labour and even the Liberals, they're a waste of space. We've got to move on. We've got to get forward because this country is in a mess, a big mess. And none of the others, Labour or Tory or Liberals, is going to do much about it. They never did in the past and they're not going to now. And in relation to this lady who's again going to put up her taxes after billions, after millionaires left the country, after billionaires left the country, now this woman's going to put up taxes for the ordinary people. If the people in this country just can't wake up to the fact that they're being fleeced left, right and centre, just did Sunday Express there a couple of days ago, they were talking about how a great many people, hundreds of people who were murderers were getting into this country because there's no documentation. How many people were getting raped in this country? Hundreds of rapists coming into this country, hundreds of murderers coming into this country. Right. And what are these people doing about it? Nothing.
No, I agree. I don't even know, John, I don't know why I pay taxes anymore, quite frankly. I pay pretty much the highest rate and have done for a long time. And I don't take anything off the state. Nothing. I've even got private medical insurance. I don't have dependents. I don't cost the state anything. And yet I'm paying for these men who are danger to me personally to be holed up in hotels. And I've had enough. John, thank you ever so much. Let's speak quickly to Richard, who is in London. Hello, Richard.
Hi, Alex. I just wanted to make the point. You said that the person at the weekend with the attack was, of course, British born. And I think there's lots of people sort of almost...
We've got to be kind of careful. I'm just going to interrupt you there, simply because journalistically speaking, when someone has been charged with a crime, the amount that we can then report on the person is very, very restricted because it could prejudice the trial. So there are very strict rules around this. So we've got to be very careful talking about the individual, what his personality might be, what he may or may not have done. We can carry on talking, but as long as we don't go down that avenue.
No, the point I want to make is that the issue about people being British born is actually almost irrelevant, because if you look at some of our the fact of the matter is we have long-term integration problems in this country, and if you look at, for instance, one of the cities where there was the rape gang problem, 1 in 50 men there from a certain heritage were actually involved in raping British girls. Now, Alex, they're all British born, so this is about long-term problems of integration, and in terms of. I think there's a pattern which we can clearly see from all the most violent attacks from 7/7 onwards, and there are two main ethnicities involved, and I think we can talk as much as we like about.
We're venturing into Richard. We're venturing into very sensitive territory here, and I don't think I have enough time to really pad out our conversation to do it justice. But it is worth remembering that LNER hero, who has saved multiple lives through his bravery, who has been named today. Now, I don't know where he was born, but it's I would actually surmise from his name that he is likely to be of Muslim heritage. So there are good and bad people from all walks of life, but when it comes to larger trends and when it comes to statistics, things we can actually back up with empirical evidence, there's certainly conversations to be had. Richard in London, thank you ever so much. Hello, Mr. Collins.
Happy Christmas.
Oh gosh, because the John Lewis advert's out.
Yes, got me right going, As.
That's it?
Yeah, love all that. I haven't seen it, by the way.
All right, well, you'll probably have to play it later and talk about it.
Yeah, have you done it? Have you played it?
I've played it.
Have you really?
It didn't really move me at all.
Didn't move you? Remember the old John Lewis
I
days
did.
of tears and tinsel?
No, it did sort of make me want to cry for the loss of
Bouncing
the
dogs.
90s, because the 90s were really good. What is interesting, though, is when you look at it, they've clearly gone, right, who are the people most likely to shop in John Lewis this year? Oh, right, the people who are raving in the 90s. They seem to have cannily targeted the right demographic this
They
year.
probably paid a lot of money to
various
nail that
advertising
down.
companies seem to fail to do.
Yes.
On a regular basis.
They're not that good at it.
They're not very good at going, who buys our products? Oh, right, let's go for that particular area of the market.
So that is the big debate this afternoon. Your favourite Christmas... No, it's not. We wouldn't do that to you. Not in a million years. We will talk about Rachel Reeves, though. Because, of course, you know, she's dynamic. She's on fire at the moment.
Isn't she just?
I mean, the brain of the woman is just incredible. We've never seen anything like it. It's like all the Chancellor's collective fiscal might in one big, amazing package of positivity. And it all comes from our Rach. How proud should we be today?
It seems to me she basically stood there and goes, the right wing's to blame for everything, and went down the whole sort of checklist, didn't she? Oh, it's Donald Trump's tariffs. Oh, it's Brexit.
It was partly your fault,
because
you were monkeying around in Brussels doing all that stuff, and now we're here, according to Rach.
Right, yeah, and everything left-wing that she's done. You know, the bit that really made me laugh when she talked about how much Quangos waste money, and I'm like, you made 11 new Quangos a year ago.